Chapter 4171. At this moment, Demon Emperor Kai's cold voice came from the mouth of the demonic formation's demonic spirit. You and I agreed to split it 50-50. How can I go back on my words? Besides, you came to the ruins first, and I came later. I should be the one asking you this, right? You. Demon Emperor Kai was at a loss for words. He said angrily, I entered the ruins first, but in order not to attract the attention of the humans in the ruins and let those wandering souls be tainted with evil energy and dirty blood, I didn't devour those immature blood spirit. Moreover, when I left the ruins, these blood spirits were all perfectly fine within the Great Barrier Formation. Why are those blood spirits gone now that you've broken the formation? The matter of the blood spirits is the same as the matter of the demonic saber murder. I've never heard of it. Demon Emperor Kai's voice was still indifferent. Besides, you also saw that I was used by the demonic formation. Previously, I was just following the plan to break the ruins Realm Guardian formation. I didn't stay in the ruins for even a moment. Do you think I can devour tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of blood spirits? Don't tell me you didn't know that there were demons refining demonic banners in the ruins before, right? But. Demon Emperor Kai was dumbfounded. They worked together with the demonic formation's demonic spirit to use the demonic world's supreme secret technique to isolate the ruins from the netherworld. They wanted to accumulate blood spirits in the ruins, but who would have thought that when it was time to harvest, these blood spirits actually disappeared? No one could accept this. At this moment, Demon Emperor Kai seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly looked at Buddha body. However, looking at the Buddha light around body, Demon Emperor Kai still didn't understand. He didn't believe that body had a divine ability that surpassed the demonic formation's demonic spirit. Therefore, he unconsciously looked at Xiao Hua again. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua's face was innocent and still looked injured. Before Demon Emperor Kai could think more, Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua had already activated his innate true energy to kill the Demon Emperor's clone. The group of cultivators moved their figures and surrounded Demon Emperor Kai again. Fellow Daoist. Bone-honing Xiao Hua's weak voice sounded in Xiao Hua's mind. I can't hold on for long. The remnant consciousness in this celestial skeleton is too fierce. All right. Xiao Hua nodded and instructed, then lead the devil spirit of the devil array into the realm protection grand array. Before Xiao Hua could finish speaking, a great change occurred within the space of the two formation. The devil spirit, who was fighting with the celestial, suddenly retreated. It raised its head and spat out another bolt of lightning. Woo! This time, it spat out a pitch-black thunderbolt that was dozens of feet long. This thunderbolt crossed the space of thousands of miles and really landed on the devil formation above them. Rumble. The huge demonic array began to tremble. Demonic chi that spanned hundreds of miles came crashing down like a mountain. Hey! What are you doing? Xiao Hua was a little stunned. Others might not know about this huge devil ball, but he was very clear about it. Previously, when he used the soul punishment essence light to kill the golden-winged great peng bone bird, it was this devil ball that sucked away 30% of the soul punishment essence light. Although the devil chi had isolated Xiao Hua's perception, Xiao Hua knew that the inside of this devil balloon was definitely the wood and water magnetism that he had seen before. However, he really did not understand why the devil clan would take this magnetism. Could it be that they want to use magnetism to break the realm-protecting great array? This is the only possibility. The devil spirit is afraid that it can't completely destroy the realm-protecting great array, so it wants to borrow the power of magnetism. Xiao Hua was still pondering, but the devil Emperor Kai did not give him a chance. The devil emperor spread its wings, waved the devil spear in its hand, and pounced on Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua was shocked. He urged his body to flee in the direction of the scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua and the others. At the same time, the bone-tempering Xiao Hua also hurriedly urged the celestial to sweep across the sky, wanting to rescue them. However, the Devil Emperor Kai was the Devil Emperor of the Mayfly race, who was proficient in spatial escape. With a flap of its wings, it had already arrived in front of Xiao Hua. Even the devil spear refined by the bone dragon had already pierced Xiao Hua's back. Xiao Hua hurriedly formed a seal, and a yellow shield appeared in front of the devil spear. Pa! The devil's spear touched the shield, and countless fragments flew up with the wind. The devil's spear turned into a bone dragon, and the dragon's horn showed a dizzy color. Xiao Hua's back twisted strangely, swish. At this moment, a golden light flashed, like a thunderbolt, and chopped the Devil Emperor Kai's devil spear arm. Ka. A series of crisp sounds rang out. The Teng Jiao shears revealed a domineering golden light, and the Devil Emperor's devil arm was immediately cut off by the Teng Jiao shears. The Devil Emperor Kai was stunned, because the Teng Jiao shears should be in the hands of the green-robed Xiao Hua, and the latter was still some distance away. The Devil Emperor Kai did not even see the green-robed Xiao Hua take out the Teng Jiao shears. However, after the Devil Emperor Kai recovered from his shock, he did not feel anything else. For a Devil Emperor, any part of his devil body could be regenerated, so there was no need to spend too much effort. However, the moment the Devil Emperor Kai's arm was regenerated, the scene in front of him made him go completely crazy, because, in the instant he was stunned, the devil's spear that no one was controlling in midair disappeared. It disappeared into thin air. There was no fluctuation of magic power, no sign of any omen. Roar! The Devil Emperor Kai roared. A pair of devil wings flapped, and devil chi scattered into the void. Fluctuations spread all around Xiao Hua, and thousands of white bones shot out, blocking Xiao Hua's path. Ha ha ha! Xiao Hua laughed. He waved his hand, and a circle of golden light flashed, and all the white bones were cut off by the Teng Jiao shears. Following his laughter, Xiao Hua's figure teleported away. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua and the other clones broke through some of the restrictions of the devil formation, and teleported around the Devil Emperor Kai. Even Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua and Sun Jian came out from the other battles to deal with the Devil Emperor Kai at this point. How could the Devil Emperor Kai not know that he had fallen into Xiao Hua's trap? From the beginning, the other party had taken a fancy to the Devil Spear in his hand, which could contend against the Devil Saber. He even flew out from the battle to deliver the Devil Spear for himself. Ao. The Devil Emperor Kai roared several times, and devil chi soared into the sky. His wings flapped again, and his devil body teleported. However, what puzzled Xiao Hua was that the Devil Emperor Kai did not chase after him. Instead, he retreated, and flew directly to the place where the wood and water origin magnetism fell. Then, the devil horn on the Devil Emperor Kai's forehead frantically rushed out, and landed on the devil pillar that was attacking the realm-protecting Grand Array. The devil pillar became more and more frantic under the fluctuations, and like a violent wave, it attacked the devil formation. Similarly, right after the devil pillar, the wood and water origin magnetism increased its speed, and rushed into the flames of the realm-protecting Grand Array. Conspiracy. There must be a conspiracy here. Xiao Hua stood in midair, and did not have the slightest joy of getting the devil spear. He screamed madly in his heart, I should have thought of something. But, why can't I think of anything? The Devil Clan would definitely not use the wood and water origin magnetism for no reason. Besides, wasn't the realm-protecting Grand Array of the ruins already broken? Why do they still need the wood and water origin magnetism? If the Devil Emperor Kai did not come to snatch the Devil Spear, why did he fiddle with the origin magnetism? As the wood and water origin magnetism fell into the Great Array, the heavy devil chi in the surroundings began to peel off, revealing the wood and water origin magnetism with devil veins inside. Xiao Hua immediately sensed the blood essence he left inside. However, under the interference of the devil flame and devil chi, Xiao Hua's blood essence did not completely permeate the wood and water origin magnetism. Xiao Hua's consciousness swept over, but it was still blocked by the devil chi, and he could not absorb the wood and water origin magnetism into his space. Oh! Just as Xiao Hua's consciousness swept over with his divine sense, the Devil Emperor Kai seemed to have sensed something. He suddenly turned his head, and his devil sense swept over madly. Surround the Devil Emperor Kai. Xiao Hua hurriedly ordered the Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua and the other clones, and he prepared to rush under the realm-protecting Grand Array to take a look. After the Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua and the other clones, there were also human cultivators of the ruins who chased after them. Even the Devil Emperor Kai waved his devil hammer and smashed it towards the realm-protecting Grand Array. Xiao Hua's thoughts were the same as the cultivators of the ruins. He did not want the battlefield to shift to the ruins, so he hurriedly teleported to the place where the realm-protecting Grand Array was torn apart. At this moment, the realm-protecting Grand Array where the wood and water origin magnetism landed suddenly emitted the sound of bubbling. In the midst of the dissipating flames, a gorgeous extreme magnetic origin light suddenly appeared. It was so beautiful in the crimson flames. The green and black extreme magnetic origin light were like blooming daisies, falling into the crimson flames one after another. However, this beauty was also cruel. The extreme magnetic origin light was like a sharp blade, cutting down the flames piece by piece. In just a few breaths, the realm-protecting Grand Array had spread more than 1,000 miles. Looking at the gorgeous origin light, and seeing the traces of devil chi and scarlet bloodlight in the origin light, Xiao Hua's heart gave birth to a strange feeling. He immediately thought of the day when he discovered the origin magnetic space in Yong'an Mountain. At that time, the origin magnetic field above the cliff was so beautiful and so austere. The fire and earth origin magnetic field in the origin magnetic field really moved Xiao Hua. Not good. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua suddenly understood something. There's a problem with the fire and earth origin magnetic field. This Xiao has already dripped my blood essence into it more than 10 years ago. According to the experience of the hidden immortal continent, my blood essence can already cover the fire and earth origin magnetic field. Let's not talk about the blood essence in the demonic array. There is demonic chi in the magnetic field, but there is no demonic chi in the magnetic field under the cliff. Why is it that when I flew over the southwest border several times, I didn't notice any movement in my blood essence? Could it be that the origin magnetic field was also tampered with by the devil race? If so, then why did the devil race tamper with the two origin magnetic fields? While pondering, Xiao Hua had already descended from the realm-protecting Grand Array. At this moment, the wood and water origin magnetic field had already fallen into the air, and the ground was precisely where the cliff was located. The black and green extreme magnetic origin light of the wood and water origin magnetic field filled the entire space. It was even more beautiful than what Xiao Hua saw before. However, when Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over and saw everything that happened at the cliff, he unconsciously felt his soul fly out of his body. -13. Chapter 4172. The space within several tens of thousands of li was filled with extreme magnetic rays. However, other than the black and green extreme magnetic rays of wood and water, the other two types of magnetic rays were also rapidly flashing in the space. These two types of magnetic rays were red and yellow and were entangled with the black and green extreme magnetic rays. The red extreme magnetic rays collided with the black extreme magnetic rays and the yellow extreme magnetic rays collided with the green extreme magnetic rays, bursting forth with powerful might. This might be powerful, but under the sharp extreme magnetic rays, it was slightly insufficient. The four extreme magnetic rays were nothing in the air, but once they landed on the ground where the broken cliff was, the entire ground was cut apart by the extreme magnetic rays. What was special was that the large pieces of land that were cut apart were fiercely pushed away under the might of the magnetic rays. Even though the earth attribute was the majority in the land, there were many things of the 5 elements. Under the innate rejection and cutting of the 4 types of magnetic rays, the land of the 5 elements all collapse. It was as if there was an incomparably huge hand that was tearing this land apart and forcefully pulling the southwest border of the ruins away from the ruins. It can still be like this. This is the rhythm of completely tearing the ruins apart. Damn it, these devils are really too imaginative. Seeing this situation, how could Xiao Hua not know the devil's plan other than being shocked? What was special was that the fire and earth magnetic rays that were previously buried under the broken cliff, under the push of the wood and water magnetic rays that the devil brought over, they dug deeper into the ground. Following the penetration of the magnetic rays, the collapsing southwest border continued to collapse and spread towards the center of the ruins. This spreading speed was extremely fast. Tens of thousands of li of land disappeared. Large pieces of rocks and soil rushed into the sky and floated in the air following the law of the extreme magnetic rays. If there was no method to collect these 2 magnetic rays, it would not take long before the entire ruins would be torn into pieces by the magnetic rays. The entire star would turn into dust in the star field. How could Xiao Hua dare to be negligent? He hurriedly released his consciousness and wanted to collect the metal and wood magnetic rays into the space like before. It was a pity that the wood and water magnetic rays were incomparably heavy and could not be collected at all. What was special was that the extreme magnetic ray that was tainted with demonic energy was so sharp that even the Devil Emperor could not detect it. Xiao Hua's attempt was fruitless, so he could only give up. Immediately after, Xiao Hua took out the sword gourd with a flick of his hand. Under the urging of his magic power, the Soul Execution Origin light transformed into a waterfall that charged into midair. Even though the Soul Execution Origin light had some attractive force that drew away a portion of the extreme magnetic origin light, this portion of origin light was truly too little and was utterly unable to have the effect of preventing the ruins from shattering. Moreover, Xiao Hua continuously used the 3 corpses Yin lightning, 5 Qi righteous lightning, and 9 heavens divine lightning. When these lightning bolts fell into the origin magnetic field, they were all drawn away with all their might. Similarly, they were unable to stop anything. What should we do? Xiao Hua was truly at his wit's end. Looking at the ground that was rapidly collapsing, his eyes turned rapidly. At this moment, the previously impregnable Great Barrier Array began to crumble just like the ruins. A huge amount of demonic qi was like a tidal wave, extinguishing the scarlet flames wherever it went. Blood rivers and demonic pillars descended from the sky, and countless devil clan members rushed out from the demonic qi, charging into the great array. The cultivators of the ruins had long been prepared when they saw the realm-protecting formation being broken. While organizing a formation to resist, they also issued orders to the nearby disciples to go over and face the enemy. Even though the devils rushed in crazily, the human cultivators at this time were all in the void refinement and Tao transformation realm. Except for some devil monarchs who could resist, the other devils were all turned into ashes by the cultivators' magic treasures. Xiao Hua looked at the brilliance of the magic treasures on his left that soared into the sky and listened to the endless rumbling sounds, but his mouth was abnormally bitter. Although his arrival in the ruins had added a lot of variables to the war between Taoists and devils, and he even thought that he could control the situation of the war just now, the cruel reality told him that any war was not a one-man game. No one could control the situation of the war at will, unless this person had strength that surpassed everything and could turn the clouds and rain with a flip of his hand. Obviously, the current Xiao Hua was far from having such strength. Even if he was a heavenly being, he could not. However, just as Xiao Hua was racking his brains to think, he suddenly discovered a strange phenomenon. The Devil Emperor Kai, who was abnormally ferocious before, was now activating his wings. Although he was besieged by the Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua and the Confucian Cultivator Xiao Hua, his devil consciousness was still exploring around him. He did not care about the earth that was torn apart by the 2 magnetic field. On the contrary, the Devil Emperor Kai, who was silent before, activated his body at this time. While fighting with the dragon vein Xiao Hua and Buddha body, he moved towards the magnetic field. As for the devil formation devil spirit, it seemed to have reached its limit. While fighting with the bone-honing Xiao Hua, the power of its hands and feet was also reduced by 30%. Previously, the Devil Emperor Kai and the Devil Emperor Kai were the first to rush into the realm-protecting formation. Moreover, they also mentioned the blood spirit. Obviously, their target of besieging the ruins was those wandering souls. Now, this wandering soul has been taken away by this Xiao Mao. This made their plan fail. Even if they capture the ruins, I'm afraid they will not achieve their previous goal. However, they are still fighting here. Although it's because there are still humans in the ruins, the most important thing is the agreement with the Devil Emperor Kai. The 3 Devil Emperors must have their own plans. What is this Devil Emperor Kai's goal? Xiao Hua thought to himself. Moreover, looking at his appearance, he is really looking for something. Moreover, this thing is inside the ruins. It's even at the southwest border. The southwest border is so broken. Clearly, there were humans or devils who used this method to search for it in the past. Or perhaps, this human is related to the Shandao sect. Yun Che was right. The Divine Blade Clan and the Devil Emperor Kai were indeed looking for the same thing. This thing is enough to make the Devil Emperor of the Devil Realm jealous. However, this thing, What is it? The Tao sect's magic cannot find it, the devil race's divine ability cannot find it, and can only rely on two magnetic fields to tear the earth apart to find it. Countless gravel and soil rushed into the sky. Similarly, the huge magnetic light rotated in the sky like a spiral. In the sky, the gorgeous aurora appeared again. Even more magnetic fields fell into the earth. Even more mountains, hills, and soil were crushed under the might of this heaven and earth. Xiao Hua tried the power of the domain and couldn't help but smile bitterly. He cursed in his heart, "Damn it, these 5 elemental magnetic fields are really too abnormal. No wonder the 5 elemental wishful heaven-reaching staff needs to be used." Just as Xiao Hua cursed, his body suddenly trembled. Boundless ecstasy appeared in his eyes. It was as if a hand was about to reach out from his throat. He couldn't help but slap his head and shout, "Damn it, I'm really stupid to the extreme." The reason why the 5 elemental wishful heaven-reaching staff can refine the 5 elemental magnetic fields together is because it uses the principle of the 5 elements engendering each other. Metal gives birth to water, water gives birth to wood, wood gives birth to fire, fire gives birth to earth, and earth gives birth to metal. By refining the magnetic fields of the 5 elemental magnetic fields together, it can create a magic weapon that doesn't entangle with any realm. And what the 3 great devil emperors are using today is also the principle of the 5 elements engendering each other. Metal restrains wood, wood restrains earth, earth restrains water, water restrains fire, and fire restrains metal. By combining these magnetic fields together, they can create a repulsive force that no one can stop, and then use this repulsive force to destroy the ruins. If I can use the principle of the 5 elements engendering each other and use the method to refine the 5 elemental wishful heaven-reaching staff, won't I be able to stop this crazy magnetic light? While Xiao Hua was thinking, his gaze quickly landed on the 2 magnetic fields. The majestic object in the sky was the wood and water magnetic field, and the magnetic field under the earth was the fire and earth magnetic field. If he wanted to use the principle of the 5 elements engendering each other, he would need the water and fire magnetic field or the wood and earth magnetic field. Of course, it wasn't just the 5 elemental magnetic fields, he also needed the place where the 5 elemental magnetic fields were combined and refined by the innate mother. Xiao Hua just happened to collect the water and fire magnetic fields under the black wind ridge of the hidden immortal mainland. Moreover, there were innate fire jellyfish and innate fire jellyfish in his space. In other words, Xiao Hua already had the conditions to subdue the 2 destructive magnetic field. However, the magnetic light was so powerful now that Xiao Hua couldn't get close to it. The domain and mind that he could rely on also couldn't get close to it. Moreover, the 3 great devil emperors were nearby. How could they allow him to collect these 2 magnetic fields? At this point, Xiao Hua already didn't dare to think too much. The magnetic force's range was very wide, and now was just the beginning. It could only harm the surface of the earth. If after a period of time, the magnetic force would seep into the earth's core, or affect the stability of the ruins, not to mention the arrival of a starstorm, even a gust of wind would be able to blow the ruins away, right? Fellow Taoist. Xiao Hua decisively shouted, "I have something to do. You all surround the 2 devil emperors, don't let them disturb All right." Soul cultivator Xiao Hua and the others sensed Xiao Hua's intention. They all nodded and urged their magic power to attack the devil emperors, waiting for Xiao Hua to cast his spell. Without waiting for Xiao Hua to take out the water and fire magnetic fields from his space, the devil aura around Devil Emperor Kai's body suddenly flourished. Then, he raised his hand and patted his head. Just like a Tao cultivator casting a spell, a blood light soared into the sky and fell down. It was precisely mixed with the wood and earth magnetic field's origin light, and in a moment, this blood light was like a layer of densely packed little worms, wriggling on the torn earth. Xiao Hua knew that this was Devil Emperor Kai using the devil race's secret technique to search for something. He didn't hesitate at all. His mind entered the space and took out the water and fire magnetic field. Boom! When his mind entered the space, a rumbling sound could be heard in the sky. Not only was the air compressed to the point that it gave birth to an explosive sound, even the unparalleled magnetic light was distorted by the pressure. The 3,650 mu in size of the water and fire magnetic fields, emitting red and black, appeared in front of the human race and devil race's eyes. Even the three great devil emperors were startled by the sudden appearance of this huge object. The moment the red fire polar magnetic rays and the black water polar magnetic rays appeared, they immediately changed their original directions and blended with the raging fire polar magnetic rays and water polar magnetic rays in the air. At the same time, the mutual restraint between the wood polar magnetic rays and the fire polar magnetic rays and the earth polar magnetic rays was greatly reduced. As a result, the torn land also slowed down. -13. Chapter 4173. Aoo. Seeing this, Demon Emperor Kai roared and swung his demonic hammer. His demonic leg swept across and even his silver-black demonic arm attacked the soul cultivator Xiao Hua. He wanted to pounce on the water and fire magnetic field. Seeing this, the Daoist cultivators were overjoyed. Many of the cultivators who were fighting the demon monarch abandoned the demon monarch and flew over to stop Demon Emperor Kai. On the other hand, Demon Emperor Kai glanced at the water and fire magnetic field and then looked at Xiao Hua. He didn't do anything. Clearly, he wasn't interested in whether ruins was torn apart or not. However, just as they were about to block Devil Emperor Kwong let out a furious roar. His fat arm swung through the air for a moment, then suddenly pierced through the void and appeared next to the water and fire magnets. Boom! The arm pierced through the magnets, and a seemingly corporeal pillar of devil chi slammed into the magnets. The magnetic field was more than 3,650 mu in size, but it was blasted away by Demon Emperor Kai. Of course, taking advantage of Demon Emperor Kai's distraction, bone-tempering Xiao Hua stretched out his arm and hit Demon Emperor Kai's body. Pu. Demon Emperor Kai's body was sent flying and the demonic chi in front of his chest was pulled down by 100 feet. Sigh. Demon Emperor Kai let out a sorrowful cry as if he was heavily injured. His body trembled violently and showed signs of collapsing. Seeing this, bone-tempering Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He flew forward and at the same time, his 6 arms fell into the void and attacked Devil Emperor Kai from all directions. Xiao Hua didn't have time to care about other things. He quickly released his consciousness to control the water and fire magnetic field. However, his consciousness was cut into pieces by the magnetic light and he felt a heart-wrenching pain. Xiao Hua's figure trembled, and he gritted his teeth tightly as he tried his best to persist. Right at this moment, the Devil Emperor Kai suddenly let out a long howl towards the sky, and then its enormous body shrunk swiftly before it descended towards the ground. Crack, crack. A rather choppy sound resounded from the devilish armor, and it was precisely the sound of the magnetic rays descending upon it. Demonic chi and indescribable demonic runes seeped out from the demonic armor. Although these demonic chi and runes were instantly shattered, they were regenerated in just a few breaths of time. The demonic armor had actually blocked the extreme magnetic origin ray that was capable of tearing apart one's mind. Seeing that the Devil Emperor Kui was about to escape, the soul cultivator Xiao Hua and the other cultivators were about to stop him. Xiao Hua's heart trembled, and he hurriedly said, "Fellow Taoists, ignore him. Let him go and find something. Once he takes the thing, he will naturally not care about these 2 magnets. You all protect don't let the other demons disturb us. I will store these 2 magnets into the space." Yes. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua and the other clones knew what Xiao Hua was thinking. Right now, the first thing they wanted to do was to protect the safety of the ruins. Any treasure was nothing compared to the lives of the cultivators in the ruins. Everyone agreed and separated, protecting Xiao Hua and Yuan Mi together. Rise. Xiao Hua clenched his teeth and released his domain to block the extreme magnetic origin ray for his mind. Then, his mind wrapped around the water and fire magnets and pulled them towards the center of the 2 magnet. Boom! As the 3 magnets got closer and closer, the entire space rumbled. More and more extreme magnetic origin rays fused together, and the sound of the earth tearing began to weaken again. At this time, the Devil Emperor Kui had already fallen to the ground. The demonic hammer in his hand fiercely smashed the ground. The originally solid ground seemed to have been hollowed out. Rumble. Pieces of the ground collapsed one after another. In just a moment, 1,000-li-wide abyss was created. And at this time, the demonic blood that the Devil Emperor Kui had spat out earlier turned into bean-sized demons and flew towards the abyss. Swoosh! In the midst of the battle cries, a soft sound came from the abyss. It seemed to be heard by everyone's ears, but also seemed to be heard by everyone's heart. Then, a kind of faint fluctuation spread throughout the entire world. This is. Xiao Hua, who was doing his best to push the water and fire magnets, was also swept by this faint fluctuation. An extremely familiar feeling emerged from the bottom of his heart. Xiao Hua involuntarily turned his head. However, there was no sign of where he turned his head. The origin of the fluctuation was still in the depths of the earth. This is the power of origin. Although Xiao Hua didn't see it, the fluctuation of the power of origin had already penetrated deep into his space. He could clearly sense the fluctuation of the other power of origin. It's just that in this upper realm, the power of law has already weakened. The fluctuation of this power of origin is much stronger than the Dawn Rain continent and the hidden immortal continent. Xiao Hua only glanced at it and hurriedly retracted his attention. He accelerated the fusion of the water and fire magnets into the other two magnet. As the water and fire magnets gradually penetrated deeper, the devastating magnetic force finally converged by a large margin. The destruction of the entire heaven and earth also gradually stopped. However, because the magnetic force had already destroyed the structure of the ruins ground, the collapse of the earth still didn't completely stop. Phew! Xiao Hua heaved a sigh of relief. His gaze hurriedly looked towards Devil Emperor Kai and Devil Emperor Kai. Fortunately, Devil Emperor Kai was surrounded by a group of cultivators. Although there were more than 10 devil monarchs assisting him, he was clearly at a disadvantage and temporarily didn't have the energy to care about her. As for Devil Emperor Kai, he was still fighting with bone-honing Xiao Hua. The battle was still desperate and looked like it was going to tear the sky apart. Fellow Daoist. Sensing Xiao Hua's gaze, bone-honing Xiao Hua hurriedly opened his mouth. I can't hold on for more than half a cup of tea. Now, fellow Daoist needs to make a choice. Either let I withdraw and take in the Celestial, or let the Celestial's consciousness control I. No need. Xiao Hua slightly smiled and said a few words in a low voice. Bone-honing Xiao Hua was stunned. He raised his eyes to look at the chaotic valley in the distance. The red light flickering in his eyes clearly had a kind of disbelief. Bone-honing Xiao Hua then fought and retreated, luring the devil spirit of the devil formation to fly towards that valley. The devil spirit of the devil formation didn't suspect anything and chased closely behind. Seeing bone-honing Xiao Hua leave, Xiao Hua patted his forehead and opened his delirium destruction Dharma eye. He saw fine rays of various colors crisscrossing, and a wisp of emerald-green brilliance slowly flew out from the depths of the earth like the rising sun. That brilliance was so dazzling that Xiao Hua hurriedly closed his delirium destruction Dharma eye, not daring to look at it anymore. Origin of wood. Xiao Hua sighed. Only this kind of origin item can provoke the judges of the Netherworld and the Devil Emperor of the Devil Realm to take action. Only this kind of innate spiritual item that can't be detected by ordinary methods can be found by extreme methods like magnetic force. As the saying goes, a man's wealth is his own ruin. Now, because of this origin item, the ruins that is as big as a planet is also being ravaged by the devil race. If it wasn't for me, the entire planet would have been torn apart. Xiao Hua knew that now wasn't the time to snatch the origin of wood, so he didn't think about it anymore. He focused on keeping the three magnetic forces together. When the water and fire magnetic forces were gentle with the wood and water magnetic forces, and the fire and earth magnetic forces were mixed together, he waved his hand again. The innate fire jellyfish and the innate fire jellyfish fell into the air. As 2 drops of essence blood seeped into them, the 2 innate items were like 2 dancing butterflies, flying towards the place where the 3 magnetic forces came into contact with each other. Woo! Before the 2 innate items could get close to each other, the 2 polar sides of the 3 magnetic forces suddenly let out a strange wind whistling sound. The space dozens of miles to the left of the polar sides instantly collapse. The collapsed space formed a strange ring, and one ring after another fell towards the 2 innate items. At the same time, waves of energy spread out from the collapsed space to all directions. Wherever the waves passed, countless heaven and earth yuan qi turned into threads of crystal light and fell into the void. Even more so, with the impact of the heaven and earth yuan qi, hurricanes were born in the range of thousands of miles. The 5 elements in the entire space actually showed signs of chaos. With the 5 elements in chaos, the group of human cultivators who were fighting also became a little chaotic. This was because although the magnetic force was weakened, the heaven and earth yuan qi was in chaos. Their magic power actually couldn't control the yuan qi, and their magic treasures and weapons also lost control. Even their brilliance dimmed. As for the devil race, they weren't too affected. They all roared and pounced towards the human race, and the entire battle situation actually changed greatly. At this moment, a dozen or so human cultivators suddenly cried out in surprise, "Look, a phenomenon is descending from the sky." Following the direction of these cultivators' fingers, in the sky above the ruins, the outer layer of the huge demonic formation that surrounded it, and several huge rainbows were born. These rainbows were of 5 colors: red, black, green, white, and yellow, the 5 primary colors. At the end of these huge rainbows, there was a huge halo flashing. The shadows of the vermilion bird, black tortoise, azure dragon, white tiger, and Chilean vaguely appeared, and a huge power shrouded the star field where the ruins was located. As for this huge rainbow, it streaked across the demonic formation, penetrating the entire demonic formation, and countless thin shadows fell on the 3 magnetic forces. A phenomenon is descending from the sky. The divine weapon is formed. Perhaps Xiao Hua didn't know what this phenomenon represented, but Mo Lianxi, Hua Fei, Shangguan Ce, and the other cultivators of the ruins understood. All of them looked at Xiao Hua with great surprise, and looked at the 3 magnetic forces that were becoming more and more mysterious under the rainbow. Seeing the envy, jealousy, and hatred in the eyes of the human cultivators, Xiao Hua smiled bitterly in his heart. He knew that the 5 elements wishful heaven-reaching staff was an ancient vicious weapon, but he didn't expect its origin to be so great. He hadn't even started to refine it, and such a phenomenon had already appeared. Xiao Hua's eyes flashed with a fierce look, and he shouted loudly, "Fellow Taoist! Whoever dares to come over, whether human or devil, will kill without mercy." Yes. How could all of Xiao Hua's doppelgangers not know the importance of this 5 elements wishful heaven-reaching staff? They all responded, and several doppelgangers even abandoned the Devil Emperor, and teleported to the middle of Xiao Hua and the 3 magnetic forces. Once the doppelgangers left, the pressure on the Devil Emperor was immediately relieved. He had fought with Xiao Hua before, and also suffered a loss. In these dozens of years, he hadn't been idle. For the sake of Xiao Hua's devil blade murder, he had racked his brains to find ways and means to deal with Xiao Hua, and even found a devil weapon that was similar to devil blade murder. However, he didn't expect that dozens of years were nothing to him, but to Xiao Hua, it was important. His doppelgangers had made great progress, and he had also suffered a loss in Xiao Hua's hands. That devil spear had also been taken away by Xiao Hua without anyone noticing. He could be considered to have tried to steal a chicken but ended up losing the rice used to lure it. -13. Chapter 4174. Most importantly, hundreds of millions of wandering souls were nowhere to be found in the realm protection array of the ruins. The Demon Emperor Kai's 2 goals in coming to the ruins were about to fail. Previously, he was trapped by Xiao Hua's clones and couldn't escape. Now that Xiao Hua's clones were gone, a dozen or so human cultivators flew over, and their cultivations might not be inferior to theirs. However, it wasn't difficult for the Demon Emperor Kai to escape in front of these humans. Looking at the natural phenomenon and the ferocity of Xiao Hua and his clones, the Demon Emperor Kai had a rare thought of escaping. However, looking at the Demon Emperor Kai's figure falling into the abyss, this thought flashed past his mind. After all, he had spent so much effort to besiege the ruins for hundreds of years. There was no reason for him to leave now. The Demon Emperor Kai was somewhat unwilling. The Demon Emperor Kai flapped his wings, and his demonic aura was like a tiger. While blocking the attacks of a group of human cultivators, His demonic consciousness swept toward Xiao Hua. The Demon Emperor Kai's demonic consciousness swept over and couldn't help but be shocked. His strength was originally higher than Xiao Hua's, but under his demonic consciousness, he couldn't get within 100 miles of Xiao Hua. Needless to say, the natural phenomenon had already confined Xiao Hua. What is this thing? Is it a magic artifact refined by the human race? How can it be so powerful? The Demon Emperor Kai was once again worried. These two magnets. Clearly, they have been refined by the demon spirit of the demon array with the demon race's secret technique. Could it be that they still belong to the human race? If this magic artifact is successful, what kind of advantage can I have? It's better for me to leave. The Demon Emperor Kai had the thought of escaping for the second time. He moved his body, and demonic runes appeared around his body. The runes rushed into the air and blocked the attacks of the human cultivators. Moreover, under the command of the Demon Emperor Kai, a few more demon monarchs appeared from the void and blocked in front of him. However, just as he moved, he stopped again. His demonic consciousness looked around and thought to himself, "What's going on? Where's that demon spirit kid? He's holding the demon blade murder. Why haven't I seen him for so long? If I devour that devil spirit, I should be able to become a devil venerable, right?" Thinking of the devil spirit Xiao Hua, Devil Emperor Kai hesitated again. He released his devil sense and tried his best to search. Sure enough, after passing through the battlefield of the human race and the devil race, in the distant mountain ridge, devil chi once again crisscrossed. That familiar bloodthirst of the devil blade attracted Devil Emperor Kai's devil sense all of a sudden. Understood. I'm afraid that the celestial being's remains won't be able to kill Brother Devil formation. That's why they called the devil spirit brat to use the devil saber to kill him. The Devil Emperor Yun thought to himself, now, this human Xiao Hua is subduing the magnetic field. I don't know what he is refining, but I can't stop him. Seems like now is the time. I might as well go and devour the devil spirit first. If possible, I can take the devil blade murder away. The Demon Emperor stopped hesitating. His body suddenly shrunk. While fighting the humans, he quietly moved toward the valley. Of course, Xiao Hua didn't have the time to care about Demon Emperor Kai's scheme. He was now sitting cross-legged in front of the three magnets, casting spell seals one after another, landing on the gaps between the three magnets and the two Xiantian object. Xiao Hua didn't withdraw his golden body. After trying to refine the 5 elements wishful heaven cudgel, he felt that its power was not enough, so he simply used the heavenly dragon technique. In mid-air, not only were the golden dragon patterns fluttering wantonly, but the obscure rumbling sound like a dragon's roar was also incessant. As these lights and shadows flashed, clusters of sparks were born from the gaps. These sparks were different from ordinary flames. They were condensed from strands of extreme magnetic light. Every time they were born, the void was distorted and brought about strange fluctuations. These fluctuations wanted to spread in all directions, but they were attracted by the magnetic force and slowly fell into the magnetic field. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua and the other doppelgangers cautiously guarded around Xiao Hua. They released their divine thoughts and were carefully on guard. In the entire magnetic field, strange fluctuations were everywhere. The innate objects even disturbed the chi of heaven and earth. Except for the color of the rainbow bridge, the whole sky gradually revealed the image of earth, fire, wind, and thunder, as if a complete world was about to be born in Xiao Hua's hand. In the face of such a situation, Xiao Hua couldn't help but complain in his heart. Since he got the refining method of the 5 elements wishful heaven cudgel, he had already comprehended it thoroughly. He knew that this thing was not easy to refine, and he never thought that he would refine it outside the space. At this time, he had no choice but to force it. With his current cultivation, he might be able to refine it successfully, but what time was it? It was the crucial moment of the war with the demon race. How could he spend decades or even centuries to refine the 5 elements wishful heaven cudgel? In addition, among the 3 magnetic fields, 2 of them had been refined by the demon race. If Xiao Hua wanted to refine the 5 elements wishful heaven cudgel, he had to bear the brunt of the demon chi and demon blood inside. At this time, The demon chi inside the two magnetic fields was like Xiao Hua's greatest enemy. In the magnetic fields, they tried their best to fight with Xiao Hua for control. This kind of fight was dangerous. If he was careless, not to mention that the three magnetic fields would explode again, ruins would fall into greater trouble. Even Xiao Hua himself would suffer unimaginable injuries. Therefore, the situation Xiao Hua faced now was even worse than the human cultivators who were fighting the demon emperor. However, at this time, Xiao Hua could only brace himself to refine it. When the bystanders saw Xiao Hua display his might and awe-inspiring power, who would have thought of the danger inside? Another half a meal's worth of time later, the rainbow bridge that pierced through heaven and earth started to let out a loud rumble. After that, the entire ruins started to shake. The ground that was originally torn apart started to tear apart again. Huge vital chi pillars surged in from all directions and fell into Xiao Hua's spell. Waves after waves of indescribable mysterious waves also flew out from the void and fell into the three magnet. Fellow Taoists. Xiao Hua suddenly shouted, "Let's attack together." Good. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua, Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua, Green Robe Xiao Hua and the other doppelgangers responded. Everyone was of one mind. They each activated their Dharma idol, whether it was the dragon-shaped Dharma body, the heavenly phoenix demon body, or the 5 Qis unifications, etc. All of their Dharma powers and divine arts fell into the magnetic field. Woo-woo. Xiao Hua activated his divine arts. The rainbow bridge let out a rumble. Several 5 elements' original forms appeared clearly from the horizon and slowly fell into the magnetic fields with the rainbow bridge, haha. Just when Xiao Hua was at the crucial moment of refining the 3 magnetic fields, the demon emperor Kai laughed loudly from the abyss that was once again shattered by the 5 elements rainbow. He stepped on the devil flame and flew out. Right above his head, there was a shape that looked like a blood lotus. It was holding an indescribable thing. That thing was formless, soundless, and colorless. It could not be seen by the naked eye, spiritual sense, or devil sense. However, this thing gave birth to an obscure fluctuation in the blood lotus, blowing the bloodlight that surrounded it into a mess. As for the demon emperor Kai, although he was laughing, he did not take the thing in his hand. That silver-black demonic arm tried its best to dance under the blood lotus. There were also strange fluctuations and demonic patterns on the demonic arm. The demonic arm seemed to be able to control the thing, but it also seemed like it could not. In short, the demon emperor Kai could only fly up with the blood lotus. His huge demonic body followed, and the 2 demonic hammers swayed slightly around him, as if warning the humans to stay away. Seeing that the humans who chased after the demon emperor did not come back, Huafei and the other cultivators knew that they were in trouble. Huafei then looked at Shangguan Ce and then at Mo Lianxi, who was fighting the demon emperor Kai in the distance. There was hesitation in his eyes. He hurriedly sent a telepathic message to Shangguan Ce to discuss, "Brother Shangguan, now that the devil emperor has found what they are looking for, I'm sure they will withdraw their troops. The human race of the ruins might be saved. In my opinion, why don't we give up on fighting with the devil emperor?" No. Without waiting for Huafei to finish, Shangguan Ce said firmly, "We must not let the demon emperor succeed." Why? Huafei was a little embarrassed and angry, so he hurriedly asked. Shangguan Ce replied coldly, "The 3 great demon emperors have clearly reached an agreement. This demon emperor wants this item while the other 2 demon emperors want something else. If this demon emperor obtains this item, he will not hesitate to kill the practitioners of the ruins with the other 2 demon emperors, not to mention whether he will let go of the ruins or not. How are you going to snatch it?" Huafei also sneered. "I can only sense the strong fluctuations of that thing, but I don't even know what it is. Perhaps perfected Xiao has a way." Shangguan Ce could not help but whisper to Shangguan Ce through telepathy as he watched Xiao Hua show off his invincible power. Huafei's gaze was complicated, and he said with a double meaning, "Brother Shangguan, perfected Xiao is an outer realm cultivator, and the cultivators of the ruins have offended him. Now that he has taken advantage of us and eaten the meat, we even left some soup for him. Do you still want to count on him? What exactly is a Dharma artifact refined by nearly 10 7th stage Dao transformation cultivators working together?" Shangguan Ce was envious when he saw the five elements origin form approaching the ruins and the changes in the ruins. This is the wood origin. Just as Shangguan Ce and Huafei were discussing, the Shundao sect's sect master Yun Che, who was in the distance, suddenly shouted with ecstasy on his face. How is this possible? The ruins is just a corner of the cultivation world. How can there be an origin item here? What? The wood origin? Shangguan Ce glanced at Huafei, and both of their eyes were filled with shock. Although they did not know what Xiao Hua was refining, they were familiar with the divine abilities of origin items. They could not help but look at Xiao Hua. At this time, Yun Che had already released his primordial spirit Dharma idol. There was an oval-shaped red mole between his eyebrows. The red mole was flashing with a scarlet halo, which was similar to the color of the devil blood. It seemed that Yun Che had discovered the wood origin through this red mole. Damn it! Devil Emperor Kai heard Yun Che mention the wood origin and cursed angrily. His silver-black arm suddenly reached for the wood origin again. Unfortunately, just as he was about to touch the wood origin suddenly flew high and broke away from the devil blood's pursuit. The blood lotus then turned into tens of thousands of blood drop. -13. Chapter 4175. Seeing that the wood origin was about to break free, the Devil Emperor Kai wasn't in a hurry. Go! With a soft command, he opened his mouth and activated his devilish energy. The blood droplets spread out like a net again. Sure enough, another small blood lotus appeared a few dozen meters away from him. The Devil Emperor Kai scanned the area with his devilish senses and saw that many human cultivators were about to make a move. He didn't dare to be careless. Just like the humans, he clenched his teeth and shot out a bolt of pitch-black lightning from the devilish armor in front of his chest. As soon as it appeared, the Devil Emperor Kai's body shrank by one size. However, when the light landed on his devilish arm, the silver light on his devilish arm grew brighter and brighter. The Devil Emperor Kai fell toward the wood origin again. Buzz buzz. The space near the wood origin was trembling, and so was the Devil Emperor Kai's silver-black arm. The tremors gradually spread into the Devil Emperor Kai's devilish body. The outer layer of his devilish body began to shed as layers of devilish patterns fell off, revealing the sturdy muscles underneath. Moreover, a ferocious aura spread out from the top of his head. A few human cultivators who were secretly approaching the wood origin were actually frightened by the aura and trembled. A devil sovereign. Shangguan Ce was shocked and realized something. He exclaimed, "The Devil Emperor is relying on the wood origin to become a devil sovereign?" Keek. The Devil Emperor Kai laughed wildly. The origin energy had already begun to seep into his devil core, and an unprecedented feeling was born from it. Swoosh. At this moment, a clear cry descended from the sky. Yun Che raised his hand and slapped the top of his head. A ray of earthy yellow light shot out, and then a copper coin the size of a fist flew out and landed right where the Devil Emperor Kai was. Following the trajectory of the coin, a faint thin line emerged from the square eye of the coin. This thin line was very strange. It ignored space, demonic senses, and blood lotuses, and pierced through the wood essence. The wood essence spun and came out of the demonic arm of the Demon Emperor who, revealing a medium-sized hole in the demonic arm, the wood origin that was pierced through by the thin line disappeared in a flash. When it appeared again, it had already landed in the square eye of the copper coin. Ha ha! The light on the top of Yun Che's head brought the copper coin and the wood origin down rapidly. He couldn't help but laugh wildly. At this moment, he finally understood why the Tai Bai sect set up the ruins. This wood origin was definitely worth the Tai Bai sect's side branch to guard and search for. Furthermore, the tearing of the southwest border of the ruins should have something to do with the Tai Bai sect. The Devil Emperor, Tai Bai, and the Devil Emperor Kai's arrival, and the Devil Emperor Kai's head. Moreover, Yun Che didn't seem to care to absorb the wood origin into his body to absorb the wood origin, as if he wasn't afraid that the wood origin of the wood to explode his body to explode to pieces. Seeing Yun Che's appearance, many cultivators who had some foundation in the ruins also thought of the same thing. Just as Yun Che was getting carried away and the Devil Emperor Kai was getting flustered and exasperated, Mo Lianxi suddenly frowned again. Although the Devil Emperor Kai was furious, he didn't use any divine ability to chase after the wood origin. Instead, his actions seemed to be putting on an act. Mo Lianxi was shocked and hurriedly shouted, "Brother Yun, be careful of the willow." Unfortunately, before he could finish his sentence, an emerald green brilliance flashed in midair. Immediately after, a muffled puff sound rang out. The golden light protecting Yun Chei's body was instantly annihilated. The space in front of the primordial spirit manifestation's chest twisted and a speck of emerald green that was stained with blood seeped out. As soon as this emerald green appeared, it immediately expanded and gradually grew like a germinating seed. However, the price of this seed's growth was beyond the imagination of ordinary people. The fertilizer for the seed was actually Yun Chei's primordial spirit image. As the seed grew into a sapling, Yun Chei's primordial spirit image rapidly shrank. The faint halo above the image was now abnormally dim. Yun Chei's primordial spirit had been absorbed by the sapling. "You. It's actually really you." Yun Chei lowered his head and looked at the bloodstain on his chest. He sadly turned his head back and his eyes were filled with disappointment, regret, and pain. He said in a low voice, "How could it be you?" "Be careful of what?" Behind Yun Chei, the green light dissipated, revealing Liu Wuxie's figure. At this time, Liu Wuxie had a smile on her face. Her gaze swept past the crowd and landed on Mo Lianxi. She asked sarcastically, "Be careful of Liu Wuxie?" "That's right." Mo Lianxi's face was also angry, and even a little twisted. Seeing the green color on Yun Chei's face, she knew that Liu Wuxie was vicious. She actually used the Misty School's secret art to attack Yun Chei's primordial spirit. She scolded, "Be careful of Liu Wuxie." "Oh, why should I be careful of Liu Wuxie and not Mo Lianxi?" Liu Wuxie raised her hand and flicked her middle finger. A wooden arrow flew out and landed on the copper coin. The wooden arrow made an ingenious turn and landed in her hand with the origin of wood. Her hand was as beautiful as a flower. Looking at the copper coin that imprisoned the origin of wood, Liu Wuxie could not help but smile. "It's very simple." Mo Lianxi looked at Yun Chei's life force fading away with heartache. She said coldly, "When the devil race surrounded the ruins, this Mo had already privately looked for sect master Yun. Although the devil race could surround the ruins and seal most of the teleportation channels, how could the devil race know about those secret teleportation channels? Even if they have innate spatial talents, they definitely wouldn't be able to discover them, unless they have a spy in the ruins. And this spy must know all the secret teleportation channels in the ruins. In the entire ruins, those who fit this condition can be counted on one hand. Mo Lianxi looked at Liu Wuxie, as if she wasn't afraid that Liu Wuxie would suddenly attack. Among these people, Sect Master Liu seems to be the most suspicious, right? However, Sect Master Yun didn't care and turned a deaf ear to this Mo's words. "Sigh, as expected, you've finally revealed your true colors." Then, Mo Lianxi looked at Yun Chei and asked, "Sect Master Yun, you knew that Liu Wuxie was the most suspicious. Why, didn't you guard against her?" Yun Chei looked at Liu Wuxie. All of the regret in his eyes had disappeared, leaving behind only a faint trace of sadness. He replied softly, "There are some people that I need to be on guard against, but there are others that I don't want to be on guard against. I'm willing to give my everything to her, and I only hope that she won't let me down." Unfortunately, in her eyes, nothing can compare to power and lust. Everything she does has a purpose. My choice may have been wrong, but I don't regret it. "You." Mo Lianxi stomped her feet. She was really angry that he didn't fight back. She didn't know what to say. A strange expression appeared on Liu Wuxie's face. She looked at Yun Chei and lifted her hand, as if she was about to do something. However, when she touched his hand, she couldn't feel any magic power. Liu Wuxie then asked, "You knew all along?" "I can't take what Sect Master Mo said seriously. But when I heard that you and Spiritual Master Xiao were fighting together, and Spiritual Master Xiao went missing. You were heavily injured and went into seclusion. I immediately became suspicious. You've always treasured your reputation, so how could you be injured so easily?" And when I heard that spiritual master Xiao had a devil art, I was even more certain. If the devil race has a spy in the ruins, then it must be you. Liu Wuxie's expression tightened. Then, she asked with interest, then why didn't you tell spiritual master Xiao Hua? Although you're not my match, Xiao Hua has the strength to do so. Spiritual master Xiao abhors evil. If I told him, would you still be alive? Moreover, spiritual master Xiao is an outsider after all. Yun Che said. He wanted to take out the pill, but his strength seemed to have been sucked out. He only had the strength to speak. Mo Lianxi was about to move, but the Devil Emperor waved his arm and blocked in front of Mo Lianxi. Liu Wuxie glanced at Mo Lianxi and said indifferently, his heart veins have been destroyed, and his primordial spirit has been sucked into the wood spirit. You don't need to waste your time. I just want to get the wood origin to surpass the Dao transformation. Don't force me to do it. I forced you to do it. Mo Lianxi was furious. She pointed at Yun Che and said, you did it yourself. No one forced you. You killed the person you trusted the most. No one can accompany me on the path of Dao transformation, Liu Wuxie said indifferently. There's no such thing as trust in this world. Chimpage. Mo Lianxi looked at the dying Yun Che and felt an indescribable pain in her heart. She snorted and said, did you hear it with your own ears? This is Liu Wuxie's answer. Are you satisfied now? It doesn't matter if I'm satisfied or not. Yun Che shrunk his neck. The little sapling in front of his chest had grown into a big tree, and his body had returned to the size of an ordinary person. He really looked like a human hanging under a big tree. He said in a lonely voice, I just feel a little cold. That's because your heart is cold. I told you long ago. Mo Lianxi didn't know how to comfort Yun Che. Sect Master Mo, do you remember the song I hummed to you? Yun Che suddenly asked. Mo Lianxi was stunned, but she replied without hesitation, of course I remember. Why do you suddenly ask? Good. Yun Che's eyes shone with a trace of brilliance, and the corner of his mouth curled up as he said, I really miss those days. The sky was blue, the moon was curved, the water was clear, and the clouds were faint. Pitiful, I'll leave everything to you to decide. I want peace. After saying that, Yun Che tilted his head. A Dao transformation cultivator actually died just like that. This really shocked everyone present. After all, a Dao transformation cultivator had already cultivated a primordial spirit. A simple primordial spirit thread divine ability could allow a Dao transformation cultivator to escape. How could he die so easily? Of course, if Yun Che wasn't determined to die, then it was because Liu Wuxie's method was too powerful. Sigh. Mo Lianxi sighed as she watched Yun Che's body rapidly wither away. Not even a trace of his primordial spirit could escape. She began to sing an inexplicable ballad. The ballad was cheerful and sad at the same time. However, as the ballad was sung, the copper coin in Liu Wuxie's hand suddenly emitted a sharp energy fluctuation. -13. Chapter 4176. Ayo, this is bad. Liu Wuxie sensed this fluctuation and immediately had a bad feeling in her heart. She immediately decided to teleport away, but it was already too late. The copper coin suddenly exploded under the influence of Mo Lianxi's ordinary song. The copper coin was an artifact that could seal the origin of wood, so its explosion was extremely powerful. Liu Wuxie was just about to teleport away when the shockwave had already enveloped an area of 1,000 miles. Not just Liu Wuxie, even Mo Lianxi, Devil Emperor Kai, and many other human and devil cultivators were trapped. Strands of earthy yellow lightning emerged from the copper coin's explosion. In the blink of an eye, half of Liu Wuxie's head and half of her shoulder were torn apart. Moreover, even more lightning surged out from the cracks and pounced on all the humans and devils within 1,000 miles. Mo Lianxi suddenly came to a realization. She knew that Yun Che couldn't kill Liu Wuxie, so he told her the method to kill Liu Wuxie. Moreover, he couldn't face Liu Wuxie's death, so he didn't guard against Liu Wuxie. His heart was filled with grief, and he sped up the song again. However, when he saw how powerful the copper coin was, he hesitated and stopped. In the few breaths of time he stopped, the copper coin's shackles loosened. Devil Emperor Kai immediately laughed sinisterly and stretched his devil arm into the void. Mo Lianxi was shocked and quickly retreated. But after retreating a few miles, Mo Lianxi suddenly discovered that at the place where he was standing before, hundreds of white bones had emerged from the void and pierced into a Mo Lianxi who looked exactly like he. Moreover, several miles to the left of Liu Wuxie, a faint layer of mist was destroyed by the copper coin's explosion as if it had been washed away by water, revealing a completely different whirl. Ah! An illusion formation? Mo Lianxi turned pale with fright. He really couldn't understand how he had fallen into an illusion formation. Moreover, he wasn't the only one. All the human and devil cultivators in the ruins, and even the 3 devil emperors, had fallen into this illusion formation as well. Who in the world had such great divine ability? At this time, Mo Lianxi's face suddenly revealed ecstasy. After all, if this place was an illusion formation, and his body could be transformed, then did that mean everything that had happened before was also an illusion? He could not help but look towards the place where Yun Che had fallen. How he wished that Yun Che's figure could still be standing in the sky right now. Unfortunately, just as he released his divine sense, a faint voice sounded in his ears. Sect Master Mo, don't look anymore. This illusion array was set up by me, but the core of the illusion array is the demonic array's demonic spirit. Fellow Taoists, you're only affected by it. Everything that happened before is real. Previously, when fellow Daoist Yun Che invited this Xiao to be a guest elder of the Shundao sect, he already told this Xiao about the spies in the ruins. This Xiao has met the sect masters of the 3 great sects, and has long since suspected Liu Wuxie. However, while I was on guard against Liu Wuxie, I neglected her ambitions. I didn't know that she also coveted the origin of wood. Moreover, you've also seen that this Xiao has to use all his strength to collect the 2 origin magnetic stones. I don't have any spare energy to guard against her attacking others. However, Sect Master Yun Che's magic treasure is truly powerful. This Xiao is worried about how to kill Devil Emperor Kai. Why don't Sect Master Mo let this magic treasure explode? It'll also fulfill Sect Master Yun's wish. Sect Master Mo, don't be afraid of injuring our human cultivators. This Xiao's illusion array can control a portion of the magic treasure's explosive power, so that the human cultivators won't be injured. Moreover, if we don't kill Devil Emperor Kai now, won't more human cultivators die when he goes crazy later? Although the voice was Xiao Hua's, it was not Xiao Hua who said it. At this time, Xiao Hua was using all his strength to collect the 3 origin magnetic stones. The one who transmitted the message was the green-robed Xiao Hua. Hearing Xiao Hua's words, Mo Lianxi was shocked. He was clear about Xiao Hua's cultivation level, and he also believed in the divine ability of the incense cult's founder. He believed that Xiao Hua was the incense cult's savior. However, he really could not believe that a mere Dao transformation realm cultivator could set up such a huge illusion array and confuse 3 great devil emperors. Moreover, one of the 3 devil emperors was the Devil Emperor Kai of the zombie race, and the devil spirit of the devil formation. However, at this time, there was no time for him to hesitate. He narrowed his eyes and began to chant the ballad again. Rumble. Tens of millions of yellow thunderbolts flashed in the sky not far away. A destructive aura shrouded the area within 1,000 miles. As soon as this terrifying aura appeared, it immediately tore apart the illusion array. Many places where human cultivators were standing were turned into empty space. The devil cultivators who were fighting against the human cultivators were dumbfounded. Devil Emperor Kai also looked at the place where his devil arm had extended out in surprise. Mo Lianxi, whose primordial spirit and physical body had withered just a moment ago, had disappeared. The most shocking of all was Liu Wuxie. After Liu Wuxie's head and arm were destroyed, he had lost all hope and thought that there was no way out for him. But at that moment, Mo Lianxi had hesitated, and the explosive power of the copper coin had weakened. Liu Wuxie had hurriedly fled. In the span of a few breaths, Liu Wuxie had already teleported more than 1,000 kilometers away. However, when she saw the lightning coming again, she realized that she hadn't even moved more than a few feet. The lightning from the copper coin was still right above her head. Liu Wuxie's face was pale. Without hesitation, she opened her mouth, and a pure white xiaohua appeared. As the xiaohua appeared, the space around Liu Wuxie immediately collapsed. The remaining half of her head rapidly aged, and her entire physical body gradually withered. However, the copper coin of the Shundao sect was a divine metal object. It could be used to attract the origin of wood, and it was also the nemesis of wood-type spiritual objects. The khaki-colored lightning fell from the sky. Although the pure white xiaohua propped up a corner of the sky, and the xiaohua also emitted powerful waves of energy, it only lasted for a few moments under the khaki-colored lightning. Boom! The metal waves annihilated the wood waves, creating a kind of annihilation of the 5 elements. This annihilation was like a pitch-black vortex, annihilating everything within a few miles. As the sect leader of one of the 3 great sects of the ruins, Liu Wuxie was a well-known expert in the ruins. Now, she was also helpless in the face of this annihilation of the 5 elements. Not only was her broken physical body sucked into the vortex, but her primordial spirit of the 5th stage Dao transformation realm was also sucked into the vortex. Not a single wisp of her soul escaped. It was exactly as the saying went, too clever of a trick, and it ended up ruining Qingqing's life. Naturally, there were hundreds of Dao cultivators around Liu Wuxie. When they were escaping, they were not trapped by the illusory formation. Now, those who were slow to escape were killed, but most of them were still alive. If Liu Wuxie was in such a state, Devil Emperor Kai would not fare any better. Under the illusory formation controlled by the green-robed Xiaohua, many khaki-colored lightning also fell on Devil Emperor Kai's demonic body. Although Devil Emperor Kai's demonic body was tens of thousands of feet tall, the demonic runes on his demonic body shattered when the lightning struck. Waves of demonic light also roared to meet the attack, but these pitch-black lightning all collapsed when it came into contact with the khaki-colored lightning. After the demonic runes were destroyed, the demonic armor appeared. The demonic armor of Devil Emperor Kai seemed to have some history. As the thunderbolts landed, the demonic armor roared furiously as the demonic souls of the devil race emerged from the armor and devoured the thunderbolts. Of course, this only lasted for a moment. Hong long long. Thunderous rumbles came from the demonic armor. The Devil Emperor Kai was like a demonic armor. Unfortunately, the demonic armor was a demonic slayer armor. As the thunderbolts pierced into the demonic body of Devil Emperor Kai, it tore apart the demonic body that Devil Emperor Kai had spent a long time refining. Roar! Devil Emperor Kai roared into the sky, and his demonic body quickly shrank. At the same time, the demonic hammer on his demonic arm danced, and the silver-black demonic arm also struck towards the lightning. The demonic hammer also had pitch-black demonic runes and lightning on it, but they all collapsed under the khaki-colored lightning. Even the demonic hammer was destroyed. As for the silver-black demonic arm, although the lightning couldn't destroy it, it still created deep holes, making it look like it was riddled with holes. As Devil Emperor Kai's demonic body shrank, the demonic energy around Devil Emperor Kai formed layers of demonic seals to resist the lightning. Although the demonic seals were destroyed one after another, the demonic energy was also formed one after another. For a time, the lightning couldn't kill Devil Emperor Kai. While Devil Emperor Kai was holding on, tens of thousands of demons around him were also destroyed by the lightning and turned into dust. Seeing this, the Demon Emperor Kai's heart was filled with sorrow. They targeted the ruins because they saw that the ruins didn't have a profound cultivation sect. However, he didn't expect that the Tai Bai sect had already set up a trap in the ruins. Although the Shundao sect's sect master Yun Che didn't have the strength to kill the Devil Emperor, the Tai Bai sect left the ruins a divine weapon that could kill the Devil Emperor. Although this divine weapon was far from being pushed to the limit, the destructive power of the divine weapon was enough to complete the Tai Bai sect's mission. Crack crack. All of a sudden, the lightning in the sky disappeared, and the copper coin that had exploded was left with a broken shape in the air. Devil Emperor Kai was stunned. How could he still hesitate? His demonic energy was already exhausted, and if the lightning fell a few more times, he would die. Devil Emperor Kai urged his body, and like a stray dog, he hurriedly fled towards the sky. The moment the thunderbolts stopped, another round of 5 chi righteous thunders struck down from above Demon Emperor Kai's head. How could Devil Emperor Kai not know that this was the Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's attack? He hurriedly stretched out his broken demonic arm and grabbed towards the sky. A layer of ripples blocked the 5-energy righteous lightning like a fishing net. However, before he saw the lightning rumble, a kind of fear immediately appeared in his heart, and he fled towards the sky without hesitation. However, just as he moved, and before the demonic shadow appeared, swoosh! A golden light flashed in the sky, and the soaring dragon scissors slashed across his demonic body. Crack! A clear cracking sound came from his heart, and his demonic core was cut in half by the soaring dragon scissors. -13. Chapter 4177. You. Devil Emperor Kai cried out in disbelief. He looked down at his devil body that was rapidly collapsing. Tens of thousands of vortexes were forming inside his devil body, and where his devil core was, wisps of devil flames were gushing out like black blood. A famous expert of the devil realm had fallen in a foreign land just like that. The most terrifying thing was obviously not this. Just as Devil Emperor Kai's devil soul left his body, a strange whirlwind appeared in the air and sucked his devil soul into a bloody place. Devil Emperor Kai didn't even have a chance to resist. Devil Emperor Kai was killed by Xiao Hua, and Mo Lianxi's figure appeared not far away. Green-robed Xiao Hua also appeared in the air like a god. What's going on? Why didn't you continue with the spell? Green-robed Xiao Hua looked at the copper coin in the air and asked Mo Lianxi in confusion. Mo Lianxi's face blushed, and she said in a low voice, "This humble one heard Yun Che sing that ballad in his early years. After so many years, this humble one doesn't remember it too clearly, hey?" Green-robed Xiao Hua laughed mischievously. He raised his hand and grabbed the broken copper coin in his hand. He said with a smile, "If you finished singing, then this copper coin would also be finished. It's fine now. Let this poor Daoist take this thing to buy buns." Daoist? Mo Lianxi was shocked. She hurriedly reached out and said, "This is something that Yun Che wore when he was young. Can Daoist give this thing to this humble one, as a memento?" "You want Yun Che's things? Easy, you can pick one yourself." Green-robed Xiao Hua smiled and said as he took out a spatial ring from his chest and handed it to Mo Lianxi. When Mo Lianxi saw this, she almost fell from the air. Wasn't this spatial ring Yun Che wore on his finger? She didn't know when green-robed Xiao Hua took it. Taking a deep breath, Mo Lianxi begged, "Daoist, this spatial ring is a symbol of the Shundao sect's sect master. This humble one thinks it's better to leave it to the Shundao sect." "Oh, that's true." Green-robed Xiao Hua rubbed his chin, as if he were thinking of something. After a moment, he said, "Then let's return this spatial ring to the Shundao sect." Mo Lianxi was helpless. She could only bluntly say, "Daoist master, it's not just the spatial ring. The things inside must also be returned to the Shundao sect." "That won't do." The green-robed Xiao Hua immediately shook his head like a rattledrum. "This spatial ring was picked up by I. How can you return it just like that?" Mo Lianxi was speechless. He thought for a moment and probed, "Spiritual master, the cultivators of the ruins have suffered great losses. In today's battle, many sect leaders have fallen. Among the 3 major sects, the leaders of the Misty School and the Shundao sect have lost their lives. The 2 sects are showing signs of decline. If you don't return the Shundao sect's things to the Shundao sect, the Shundao sect will no longer be one of the 3 major sects. It will definitely decline. Didn't Daoist Master Xiao say it before? He is a guest elder of the Shundao sect. Do you want him to be a guest elder of a small sect? The Shundao sect is reduced to a second-rate sect because of a spatial ring? How is this possible? However, what you said makes some sense. After all, Xiao Hua is a guest elder of the Shundao sect. I can't go too far." Green-robed Xiao Hua scratched his head, thought for a moment, and handed the spatial ring to Mo Lianxi and said, "Then I'll have to trouble you to transfer this thing to the Shundao sect." "Okay." Mo Lianxi took the spatial ring. Just as she said okay, her face changed slightly. Because the spatial ring was very empty, there were no materials. Elixirs and so on were gone. Only jade slips and other things were left in it. Mo Lianxi opened her mouth, but looking at green-robed Xiao Hua, she knew that no matter what she said, he wouldn't admit it. Mo Lianxi thought for a moment and had no choice but to put away the spatial ring. Looking at the many primordial spirits in the distance who were still urging their magic power to suppress the multicolored light, she asked in a low voice, "Daoist Master Xiao, is it still not enough?" "Damn it, of course it's not enough." Green-robed Xiao Hua cursed and said, "Who knew that refining the 5 elements wishful heaven staff would be so difficult? This is just the blood refining stage, and so much magic power is spent. How can I refine it in the future?" 5 elements wishful heaven staff. Mo Lianxi was dumbfounded. Of course, she had heard of the fame of the ancient vicious weapon. She didn't think that the human race of the cultivation world could refine such a divine object. Wasn't this wishful thinking? Unfortunately, how could Mo Lianxi dare to say half a word at this time? He still had to fill up the things in Yun Chei's spatial ring, and he also had to think about how to explain this to the Shundao sect elders. He didn't want to cause any more trouble. However, there was no need for him to say anything. Suddenly, a thunderous sound came from the mountain range in the distance. Several demonic pillars rose out of thin air, and the figure of a demon emperor strangely appeared in the middle of the demonic pillars, causing Mo Lianxi to tremble in fear. "Hee hee." Green-robed Xiao Hua smiled, waving the Kunlun mirror in his hand, and said, "Sect Master Mo, are you interested in watching a show with me?" "Of course." Mo Lianxi nodded without hesitation. She really wanted to see how magical Xiao Hua's illusion array was, and how this illusion array killed the other 2 demon emperors. "Let's go." Green-robed Xiao Hua called out, and the Kunlun mirror in his hand emitted a multicolored brilliance. The brilliance fell in the air and turned into pitch-black demonic energy. As the demonic energy rolled, a huge demonic space appeared. Moreover, within the space, Xiao Hua, green-robed Xiao Hua, green-robed Xiao Hua, and the others rushed towards the demonic pillars in the middle of the mountain range at lightning speed. Mo Lianxi's divine sense swept over Xiao Hua and the others. It was no different from what he saw before. But when he turned his head to look at the previous location, Xiao Hua and the others were still in the middle of the multicolored light. Sigh. Mo Lianxi shook her head slightly, and urged her figure to follow behind green-robed Xiao Hua. At this time, she didn't know whether this green-robed Xiao Hua was an illusion or not. When Mo Lianxi flew to the mountain range, she saw that the surrounding tens of thousands of miles of the mountain range had turned into a mess. The mountain range, the boulders, the forest, and everything else had been affected by the battle between the demonic spirit and the bone-tempering Xiao Hua. Nothing existed. At the demonic pillars, hundreds of millions of demonic soldiers and generals had appeared. Under the leadership of Demon Emperor Kai, they were desperately fighting against Xiao Hua and the other illusions. Xiao Hua and the other illusions were like gods that could casually kill countless demonic soldiers. And in the middle of these demonic soldiers and generals, demonic spirit Xiao Hua and bone-tempering Xiao Hua were struggling to deal with the attacks of the demonic spirit and Demon Emperor Kai. In just a moment, bone-tempering Xiao Hua was the first to be defeated, and he escaped from the heavenly white bone. Before bone-tempering Xiao Hua could take out the blood bone from the heavenly white bone, Demon Emperor Kai let out a wild laugh. The demonic spirit of the demonic spirit came out of Demon Emperor Kai's demonic body and turned into a demonic pillar that reached the sky. It rushed towards the demonic array space formed by the Kunlun mirror. Demon Emperor Kai even crossed the space and fell into the white bone. When Demon Emperor Kai fell into the white bone immediately flashed with lightning again. The 3 heads crazily spewed out multicolored light, and the 6 arms pierced towards bone-tempering Xiao Hua. Bone-tempering Xiao Hua had obviously overdrawn his spiritual power. While he tried his best to block the attack of the arms, he couldn't block the multicolored light. The multicolored light pierced through his head and he fell to the ground. After that, Devil Emperor Kai even flapped his wings and killed Devil Spirit Xiao Hua swiftly like a bolt of lightning before seizing Devil Saber Slaughter from him. Ha ha ha. Demon Emperor Kai and Demon Emperor Kai both laughed. One controlled the white bone, the other waved the demonic saber, and they attacked Xiao Hua and the other clones. In the illusion, Xiao Hua and the others were naturally not the opponents of the 3 great demon emperors. After stubbornly resisting for an hour, they were finally killed by the three great demon emperors. Demon Emperor Kai and Demon Emperor Kai still wanted to continue chasing the cultivators of the ruins. However, under Demon Emperor Kai's persuasion, they returned to the demonic array to rest first. After they readied themselves, they would return to the ruins. The three demon emperors moved their figures and proudly led the demonic soldiers and generals back to the demonic array formed by the spatial light pillar. Demon Emperor Kai was leading the way. Mo Lianxi, who was hiding in the illusion array, was ecstatic. Just as Mo Lianxi was ecstatic, she saw that the demonic spirit of the demonic array, which hadn't completely entered the Kunlun mirror, suddenly shouted, "Not good. This isn't this emperor's." Moreover, as the demonic spirit of the demonic array roared, waves of fluctuations were generated from the demonic chi pillar that he turned into, destroying the illusion array nearby. When the demonic soldiers and generals disappeared, Demon Emperor Kai's figure also disappeared. Unfortunately, before he could finish his words, the demonic saber murder flashed and cut the demonic pillar in half. Demonic spirit Xiao Hua had already stretched out his demonic body from the Kunlun mirror. The demonic chi of the blood-dripping paradise was generated, and like a torrential river, it swallowed the remaining demonic chi of the demonic array's demonic spirit. Ao. The demonic spirit of the demonic array howled crazily, trying to escape from the Kunlun mirror. However, demonic spirit Xiao Hua was also a demonic spirit that had lived for God knows how many years. He was very familiar with the demonic array's demonic spirit's weakness. After a few rounds of swallowing, he firmly controlled the demonic spirit and dragged him into the Kunlun mirror. At the same time, a powerful suction force was generated from the Kunlun mirror, firmly enveloping Demon Emperor Kai and Demon Emperor Kai at the same time. Tens of thousands of thunderbolts were generated from Xiao Hua's body and landed on the Kunlun mirror. Demon Emperor Kai seemed a little surprised. Seeing the demonic soldiers and generals around him disappear, and Demon Emperor Kai also turned into nothingness, he didn't dare to believe that everything he killed was an illusion. In particular, when the white bones around him also turned into nothingness, he understood that his formless demonic body was hurriedly fleeing for his life. As for Demon Emperor Kai, he already had a warning in his heart. When the demonic saber in his hand disappeared, he didn't stop at all. The wings on his back spread out, and the demonic horn on his forehead produced a space-tearing force. Demon Emperor Kai's figure rushed into the space crack at an extremely fast speed, and before Demon Emperor Kai could say anything, he disappeared from the illusion. Damn it! Green-robed Xiao Hua angrily cursed. The Kunlun mirror emitted a dazzling light that swept across Demon Emperor Kai's demonic body. With a sizzling sound, more than half of Demon Emperor Kai's demonic body was destroyed. The light beam rushed into the space crack, and a miserable scream came from the distance. -13. Chapter 4178. Just as green-robed Xiao Hua used the Kunlun mirror to injure Demon Emperor Kai, Mo Lianxi clearly saw that there was still a small half of Demon Emperor Kai's body falling into the void. He hurriedly used his spiritual power and spells, but he only managed to kill half of Demon Emperor Kai in the end. He still couldn't stop Demon Emperor Kai. He hurriedly reminded green-robed Xiao Hua, "Demon Emperor Kai has escaped. He can't escape." The green-robed Xiao Hua rubbed his hands, and streaks of crystal light fell into the void. Rumble. The sound of thunder resounded, and sure enough, the miserable shrieks of the Demon Emperor could be faintly heard from the void. After the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, the screams and the thunder slowly stop. The corner of green-robed Xiao Hua's mouth rose slightly. The light of the Kunlun mirror in his hand faded, revealing a mirror covered with demonic patterns. Of course, these demonic patterns were rapidly decreasing. It seemed that Xiao Hua was devouring the demonic array's demonic spirit. Shua. Like tearing silk, Mo Lianxi's eyes flashed slightly. The whole world was still the same world, but some details seemed to have changed. Looking at the messy ground, bone-tempering Xiao Hua's extremely tired figure appeared. On his shoulder was a dream mirage butterfly flapping its wings. Mo Lianxi's gaze fell on the dream mirage butterfly. Suddenly, an indescribable small world appeared, and scenes of childhood memories covered him like light and shadow. Mo Lianxi turned pale with fright and hurriedly closed his eyes. However, to Mo Lianxi's surprise, all the illusions still appeared. Cough cough. Green-robed Xiao Hua coughed. The Kunlun mirror's light pillar reappeared and took back the dream mirage butterfly. Only then did the illusions around Mo Lianxi slowly disappear. Mo Lianxi looked around in surprise, and his back suddenly broke out in cold sweat. Facing the dream mirage butterfly, the Tao foundation he had refined for tens of thousands of years was like paper. Rumble. At this moment, thunder and lightning appeared in the distant space. The original forms of the 5 elements that had appeared in the star field earlier had now fallen into the contact of the magnetism. The thunderbolt that descended from the sky not only shattered the previous imprisonment, but also fell into the original forms of the 5 elements. The original forms of the 5 elements actually produced a multicolored light that Xiao Hua could not control, causing the 3 magnetism to shake. Not good. Xiao Hua had already refined the primordial magnet and innate mother with his blood. He understood that this was the most crucial moment. If he couldn't refine the 5 elements into the primordial magnet, then not only would he fail, he and the others would also suffer from the backlash. This backlash wasn't just the backlash from refining tools, it was also the backlash from the celestial phenomenon. Fellow Taoists. Xiao Hua's forehead was drenched in sweat, and he had no choice but to remind them once more. His hands once again surged with seals, and all of his magic power struck the origin magnetism. Seeing the entire space slowly stop shaking and the overflowing multicolored light begin to converge, Xiao Hua's heart gradually calmed down. But at this moment, a voice filled with hatred came from beside Xiao Hua's ear. Daoist Master Xiao, have you thought about the situation when you fall? Who? Xiao Hua turned pale with fright. Right now, he was using all his strength to refine the origin magnetic field. There was simply no way for him to be distracted. If he were to draw out even a trace of his magic power, the origin magnetic field would be ruined and he would suffer a backlash. Now that he heard the malicious voice, how could he not know that he had encountered a huge problem? Sure enough, in the void, a small part of the Demon Emperor Qiong's demonic body appeared, but that voice did not belong to the Demon Emperor Qiong. Heavenly Demon? You actually have a trace of a clone? You don't return to your own sky of freedom, but still want to borrow the Demon Emperor Qiong's demonic body. You really are deliberately scheming. Xiao Hua suddenly woke up, and in the distance, the green-robed Xiao Hua was similarly shocked. The Kunlun mirror in his hand had already been activated once more. Whatever this king wants to kill, no matter if it is a human, immortal, or Buddha, this king has never failed. The heavenly demon controlled the Demon Emperor Qiong's demonic body and threw it into Xiao Hua's body. Sensing Xiao Hua's abundant essence, the heavenly demon's mouth was filled with an indescribable pride. You are but a mere human cultivator. Even if you have one fortuitous encounter after another, you will absolutely not be able to escape from this king's palm. Sensing that his body was gradually losing control of itself, Xiao Hua's eyes slightly narrowed, and he slightly withdrew the seals in his hands. Boom! A strand of 5 elements multicolored light penetrated the origin magnetic field and landed on Xiao Hua's head. Uro? What are you doing? The heavenly demon greedily absorbed Xiao Hua's essence and quickly took control of Xiao Hua's body. He asked with some surprise, could it be that you think self-destruction can free you? Don't even dream about it. Fellow Daoist. The green-robed Xiao Hua and the bone-honed Xiao Hua both hurriedly came to his rescue, and the Kunlun mirror's light pillar also covered Xiao Hua. Although Mo Lianxi at the side didn't know what was going on, how could he not know that the situation had changed? However, at this critical moment, a powerful fluctuation appeared on Xiao Hua's head. At the location of the 5 elements multicolored light, a thumb-sized emerald green light spot suddenly appeared. This light spot was extremely bright, and it shone so brightly that Mo Lianxi hurriedly closed his eyes. A strange thought immediately emerged from the bottom of his heart. Wood. Wood origin. Xiao Hua can actually capture the wood origin. Damn it, all the benefits have been taken by him. We cultivators of the ruins can't even get a mouthful of soup. It was exactly as Mo Lianxi thought. As soon as the emerald green wood origin fell, Emerald green flames instantly appeared around Xiao Hua's body, igniting every part of his body. Even the bodies of dragon bloodline Xiao Hua and the bone-honed Xiao Hua's clones also lit up with this emerald green flame. The heavenly demon and the demon emperor howled at the same time in Xiao Hua's body. Damn it, damn it. What? What is this? The heavenly demon's remnant body and the demon emperor's body had never been tempered by the origin power, so of course they didn't know what the origin power was. However, what they knew was that their devil bodies couldn't withstand the burning of the origin power. At this moment, Xiao Hua's body was completely enveloped by the origin power. Even if they wanted to escape, they couldn't. Walking into a trap, lifting a rock and smashing it on their own feet, this was probably the best way to describe their current situation. In just the blink of an eye, the two Devil Realm experts were completely annihilated. As for Xiao Hua, he had borrowed the power of the origin source to easily refine the origin magnet. After putting the origin power into the space, Xiao Hua's many clones all sat cross-legged in the air, guiding the origin power of wood to temper their bodies. Mo Lianxi looked at Xiao Hua with some envy. He knew that even if he obtained the origin power of wood, he would absolutely not dare to use it like this. Although Xiao Hua was lucky, he also had the confidence to be lucky. Mo Lianxi didn't dare to disturb Xiao Hua and the others' meditation. He flew into the sky and released his divine sense. At this moment, although 2 of the 3 demon emperors surrounding the ruins had been killed, and the remaining one had escaped, the Daoist Devil War wasn't over. The devil race was still fighting fiercely with the human race everywhere. Even in the southwest border, there were still many demon monarchs leading demon soldiers and demon generals fighting against the conference hall's troop. It was just that all the human race and devil race viewed Xiao Hua's location as a forbidden area, and no one dared to approach. Sigh. Mo Lianxi sighed. Looking at the dark clouds covering the demonic array, he knew that the task of the war was still very difficult. However, after sighing, he smiled. Although it was difficult to break this demonic array, as long as Xiao Hua was willing, the ruins would be able to see the light of day sooner or later. Woo-woo. Just as Mo Lianxi sighed, the Kunlun mirror beside the green-robed Xiao Hua produced a whistling sound. Light flashed inside, and the devil spirit Xiao Hua flew out. At this moment, the devil spirit Xiao Hua seemed to be much more spirited. He nodded at the green-robed Xiao Hua, and then his figure teleported into the sky. The following scene completely stunned Mo Lianxi. The devil spirit Xiao Hua raised his head, opened his mouth, and spat out a stream of devil chi that crashed into the devil pillar in the demonic array. Then, the devil pillar crazily rolled and quickly returned to the demonic array. The devil race hiding inside the devil pillar were all exposed. Just as these devil race were baffled, the devil pillar fell into the demonic array, and then the entire demonic array began to boil. It turned into a torrent of devil chi and devil flame that followed the devil spirit Xiao Hua's devil chi into his stomach. The hundreds of millions of devil race were slowly exposed in the starfield. With the disappearance of the demonic array, the brilliance of the 3 suns began to sprinkle over the entire earth. Looking at this crazy scene, Mo Lianxi couldn't recover for a long time. She thought that Xiao Hua would have to spend a lot of energy to break the demonic array, but she didn't expect that the devil spirit Xiao Hua who swallowed the demonic array's devil spirit could break the entire demonic array in a snap of his finger. However, the demonic array disappeared, but the devil race didn't panic too much. All the devil race reorganized their troops and attacked the ruins again. As for the human race in the ruins, seeing the disappearance of the demonic array, each and every one of them saw the hope of survival. Under the command of the conference hall, all the sects no longer held back and sent out their disciples to fight the devil race in the sky, in the forest, or by the river. In the sky, the devil spirit Xiao Hua spent 12 days absorbing the demonic array. When the last wisp of devil chi fell into his stomach, Xiao Hua and the others beside him also let out a soft cry and withdrew their Dharma forms. The originally khaki-colored bone-honing Xiao Hua stopped the Big Dipper magical fist, and 10% of his body turned emerald green. Good. Xiao Hua looked left and right, then bowed and said, "Fellow Taoists, you've worked hard. Fellow Taoists, you've worked hard." The clones all smiled and returned the greeting. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept across the ruins and said with a smile, "Now, the human race in the ruins is evenly matched with the devil race, and even has the upper hand. That devil Emperor Kai has also been seriously injured by us and is no longer a threat. We can kill some devil monarchs and lend the ruins a hand. How about it?" "Very good." The clones responded and were about to move. At this time, a layer of strange fluctuation suddenly appeared in the sky. That fluctuation blew over like a storm, and it even gave birth to a bit of fluorescent brilliance in the air. Moreover, where the fluctuation passed, all the heaven-earth origin chi was destroyed, and all the devil chi was also pierced through. Of course, this fluctuation was like the wind. After it swept over, the heaven-earth origin chi also recovered extremely quickly, and the devil chi also recovered to its original state. -13. Chapter 4179. Great Desolate Starstorm? Xiao Hua was shocked. Looking at the direction of the fluctuation and the remaining fireflies in the sky, he hurriedly shouted, How did it come so fast? Fellow Deist. Just as Xiao Hua's voice landed, Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua immediately exclaimed in ecstasy, "The Great Snow Mountain's divine sense mark is clear again. It must be that after this demonic array is destroyed, the Great Desolate Starstorm will also break through the barrier between the two realms. I can sense the Great Snow Mountain. Great." Xiao Hua was overjoyed and hurriedly ordered, "Fellow Taoists, quickly return to your positions. We will activate the south diverging north technique right now." How could bone-tempering Xiao Hua and the others dare to stay for a moment longer? They all entered Xiao Hua's body. Not far away, Mo Lianxi was very puzzled and hurriedly urged his figure to come over and ask. When Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua entered Xiao Hua's body, he still exhorted, "Fellow Daoist, don't rashly activate your soul technique. Our cultivation is not enough. When crossing the barrier between the two realms, it's best to use the teleportation array." I know." Xiao Hua nodded. Seeing Mo Lianxi flying over, he waved his hand and said, "Sect Master Mo, the Great Desolate Starstorm has already arrived. You all should quickly make a plan. The demon race is also afraid of this Great Desolate Starstorm and will definitely withdraw their troops early. I promised your ancestors matter. I will definitely accomplish it. You should also help I a little. I have a disciple." At this point, Xiao Hua's heart trembled. He hurriedly shut his mouth and shouted, "You don't need to care about I's matter. Quickly inform the discussion hall about the Great Desolate Starstorm." Mo Lianxi was somewhat puzzled as to why Xiao Hua didn't say anything. However, when he heard about the Great Desolate Starstorm, his heart was also in chaos. He cupped his hands and said, "All right, I will inform the discussion hall. Daoist, please return to the Soaring Dragon Mountain Range to arrange your disciple." Finished speaking, Mo Lianxi hurriedly left. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over and teleported towards the teleportation array. Naturally, there was a fierce battle between the human race and the devil race near the transmission array, but Xiao Hua's arrival did not attract the attention of the human race or the devil race. Xiao Hua's figure paused in the air for a moment, his eyes looking around, looking at the place where the battle once took place. He transmitted a few words to Wu Tian, telling him to prepare to come out and look for an opportunity to leave. He then descended into the ground, closed his eyes and meditated for a moment, then entered the transmission array. After that, Xiao Hua used the going south, going north technique to confirm the location marked by the Great Snow Mountain's divine sense and activated the transmission array and soul technique. Seeing a transmission channel appear in the void, Xiao Hua stepped into it. The moment his figure disappeared, he did not forget to turn his head to look at ruins. He knew that once he went in, he would not be able to see ruins again in this life, and he would not be able to see Yu Mingxin, who had some feelings for him. What Xiao Hua didn't expect was that when his figure entered the transfer channel slowly closed, and the transfer array under the ground slowly stopped operating. Another demon flapped his wings and flew over. Wasn't he the demon General Sakura that Xiao Hua had seen in the demon array before? At this time, Sakura was in a rather sorry state. There were many lacerations on his demon wings. Not only were devil flames seeping out of these wounds, but his white demon bones were also exposed. What was special was that some devil chi was uncontrollably emitting from the wounds. He looked like a sparrow with its tail on fire. When Sakura flew close to the teleportation array, the demon horn on his forehead suddenly produced a layer of faint devil halo. Sakura's face immediately became nervous. However, when he scanned the surroundings with his devil sense, he didn't find anything abnormal. His nervousness was replaced by ecstasy. Immediately after, the devil chi around Sakura's body surged. The halo on his demon horn became brighter and brighter. His figure flew towards the teleportation array that Xiao Hua was teleported to. When he landed in the sky above the teleportation array, a wave of energy shot out from his demon horn. It was precisely aimed at the underground space where the teleportation array was about to close. However, this wave of energy was weak when it landed in the void. It couldn't open the restriction of the teleportation array. Sakura turned his head to look. It seemed that there were pursuers behind him. He clenched his teeth and took out a triangular bronze magic weapon from his demon palm. This magic weapon had a faint wave of energy. Moreover, the wave of energy was already disorderly. Obviously, the array inside was already on the verge of collapse. Sakura threw this magic weapon into the wave of energy from his demon horn. That magic weapon was hidden in the void by him using a secret technique from the demon realm. Soon after, he flew another 100 feet forward and fell on the ground. His entire body was twitching slightly on the ground. He looked like he was already exhausted. Quick! Senior brothers, that demon general is over there. Sakura had just set up an ambush when a slightly weak divine sense swept over from afar. Then, Yu Mingxin's voice came through while gnashing his teeth. She's already seriously injured and can't hold on any longer. Let's join hands and kill her to avenge senior brother Chang Ming and the others. After Yu Mingxin, who was holding a long whip and wearing a silk handkerchief on her face, appeared, Yang Haoya, who was holding a long sword, also flew out. After seeing Sakura's appearance, he immediately pulled away from Yu Mingxin and flew towards Sakura in a fan shape. He even shouted, "That's right. This guy is too cunning." He actually set up an ambush next to the teleportation array and killed senior brother Chang Ming. If I don't avenge senior brother Chang Ming today, I won't be able to eat or sleep in peace in the future. Be careful. After flying for a while, WN Wuxin also flew over with a long saber in his hand and warned, "I'm afraid there's an ambush here. Humph, the heaven-earth origin chi here is not only abundant but also chaotic. There's no trace of devil chi." Yang Haoya coldly snorted, "If you say there's an ambush by my Dao disciples, I can still believe it." "That's right, little sister also doesn't believe it." Yu Mingxin raised her head and looked at the sky. The devil chi there had already dissipated and the rumbling sound was incessant. She said, "The devil race's devil array has already been destroyed by Senior Xiao and the rest. Sooner or later, the devil race will be driven out of the ruins by our human race. How can they still set up an ambush here?" WN Wuxin looked at the two men and women who were full of confidence and smiled bitterly in his heart. He opened his mouth and wanted to remind them, but he still stopped. He released his divine sense to search carefully. After confirming that there wasn't an ambush, the three of them were already close to Sakura. WN Wuxin shouted again, "Senior brother Yang, junior sister Mingxin, we don't need to get too close to this fiend. We can just take out our magic artifacts here and kill him." "That's right." Yu Mingxin nodded with hatred. She circulated the magic power in her body and that long whip transformed into a huge python that pounced towards Sakura's back. Yang Haoya didn't dare to be negligent. He also raised his long sword and the sword chi was like a rainbow. It tore through the air and fell towards Sakura's head. WN Wuxin waved his long sword and a crimson-red sword shadow came out from his body. It let out a rumbling sound and fell towards Sakura's back like a huge millstone. Just as the three of them took out their magic artifacts, Sakura's body that was lying down didn't change. His head that was facing away from everyone suddenly turned around strangely and his face revealed a mocking and ridiculing expression. Not good. WN Wuxin was alarmed. He circulated the magic power in his body and wanted to retreat quickly. Unfortunately, he was still too late. Just below the three of them, that magic artifact that was hidden in the void revealed itself. The fluctuations on the magic artifact were abnormally chaotic. A surge of energy gushed out from the magic artifact and enveloped the surrounding few miles. Although Yu Mingxin, Yang Haoye, and Wen Wuxin were already alerted and each of them circulated their magic power to protect themselves, that magic artifact that Sakura had obtained from an unknown place had an extremely strong explosive power. That violent force closed in and knocked the three of them into the sky. It even tore apart the magic that the three of them had used to defend themselves. Even their corporeal bodies were damaged greatly. And when the magic artifact's force fell on the ground, the entire earth was trembling. On the ground, there were originally withered branches, gravel, and hills. Normally, no one would come here. After the impact force passed, the wilderness was cleared out and an open space was formed. What was special was that under the open space, a layer of mysterious restriction was torn apart. Even more chaotic and frightening chi of heaven and earth surged out from the ground. The heavy rumbling sound was also exposed. Although the naked eye couldn't see through the ground, Sakura's devil sense could see clearly. Wasn't that a transmission array that was about to stop? Joy appeared on Sakura's face. His devil body that was lying on the ground suddenly flapped his wings and his entire body suddenly rushed into the transmission array. However, with a flash of brilliance in the transmission array, his body was actually about to disappear. Without waiting for Sakura's body to disappear, Yu Mingxin, Yang Haoye, and Wen Wuxin flew to the sky above the transmission array at the same time. The three of them were wearing ragged clothes and there were bloodstains all over their bodies. It was obvious that they were severely injured. However, when the three of them scanned with their divine senses, they were all shocked. Wen Wuxin cried out, "This! Why is there a transmission array here? This devil general is escaping. Chase!" Yu Mingxin shouted without hesitation. Her body swayed and she executed an escape technique to pounce into the transmission array. "Junior sister Mingxin!" Yang Haoye hurriedly cried out. This transmission array appeared for no reason. Could it be the devil general's scheme? It can't be. Wen Wuxin had long understood what was going on. This is our Daoist transmission array. Although I don't know why this devil general is able to activate it and I don't know why he doesn't use vital stones, since it's our ruins transmission array, it must be used by the human race. This demon must have been a blind cat running into a dead mouse to find this place. If he wants to use this transmission array to escape, how can we let him do as he wishes? Wen Wuxin's thoughts were meticulous. Yu Mingxin and Yang Haoye had always believed in him. Although Yang Haoye was still somewhat hesitant, Yu Mingxin was eager for revenge. When she heard Wen Wuxin's agreement, she had already executed her escape technique and rushed into the transmission array. Since Yu Mingxin was moved, Yang Haoye and Wen Wuxin didn't dare to delay and rushed into the transmission array at the same time. At this moment, in that transmission array, Sakura's figure had just disappeared. When the three of them entered, the transmission array let out a final rumble. After sending the three of them into the transmission array, it immediately stopped. However, in just a moment, the brilliance gradually receded and the fluctuations of the heaven and earth vital energy also died down. The great battle in the ruins was still ongoing. Xiao Hua and Sakura both teleported away. Yu Mingxin, Yang Haoye, and Wen Wuxin also chased after them. As for what was at the other end of the transmission array, Xiao Hua knew in his heart. The other devil general and the three human cultivators didn't know. However, somewhere in the star domain, that nameless existence that was alarmed by the celestial skeleton stopped again. His body flickered with a strange brilliance and he stuck his head out from the starlight. However, in just a moment, this existence's eyes were filled with astonishment. He tore open the void and rushed in. The direction was actually where Xiao Hua's transmission array disappeared. -13. Chapter 4180. As for Xiao Hua, he had already held the Grand Cosmos Shifting Token in his hand. The magic tool flickered with a faint halo that enveloped him. When the heavy spatial energy from the teleportation array landed on this halo, It only caused a slight ripple before disappearing again. At this moment, Xiao Hua was activating the teleportation channel while using the going southway north technique. His expression was very cautious and he appeared to be very careful. After experiencing the error in the previous teleportation, Xiao Hua already knew that even if his cultivation was at the level of a god, he could not be careless at any time. There were too many accidents in this world, and every unexpected accident would cause a huge change. And this change would happen most of the time. In other words, nothing could be done according to his wishes. Even if he had already built the teleportation channel and used the going southway north technique to discover the Great Snow Mountain's divine sense mark, he still did not have any confidence that he could teleport to the sky above the Great Snow Mountain. In fact, the current Xiao Hua did not dare to imagine that he could reach the Great Snow Mountain. He only hoped that he could return to the hidden immortal continent, Western Paradise, or any place in the Thousand Demons' sacred realm, as long as it was related to the three continents. Xiao Hua even hoped that he could return to the Dawn Rain continent. That would be even more wonderful. However, these were all extravagant hopes. Xiao Hua only hoped that the divine sense mark in the distance would be stable and not like it was now, like a candle in the wind. Fortunately, the teleportation channel had already been going for several hours. Although the divine sense mark was like a candle in the wind, it was still clear and there were no signs of it disappearing. This made Xiao Hua rather gratified. However, this teleportation channel was really long. It felt even longer than when he went from the heavenly prison to the ruins. Xiao Hua had never experienced such a long teleportation in his life. When the teleportation channel had already become a habit, Xiao Hua suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. This was because the closer the distance, the clearer the divine sense mark should be. However, in Xiao Hua's soul technique, the divine sense mark of the Great Snow Mountain was always like that, neither far nor near. Even after several hours of teleportation, it was still so far away, like a natural star, forever beautiful but forever untouchable. Just as Xiao Hua's doubts appeared, the entire teleportation channel suddenly began to tremble. The space around Xiao Hua released a trembling sound. Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed. The soul strands on his forehead surged out like a swarm of bees and landed on the transportation channel where the green seal characters were crazily surging. However, before the teleportation passageway could stabilize for a few breaths of time, a strange creaking sound was heard again. It was like a wooden boat being unable to bear the weight of the waves. After that, Xiao Hua watched helplessly as the teleportation passageway seemed to be stretched by a large hand. Even his own body became flat and slender along with the passageway. Ah! Xiao Hua tried to call out. His voice was very soft, but it was also extremely long. When Xiao Hua's figure was distorted by the time, and every part of his body was fluctuating to different degrees, Xiao Hua understood that he was once again in a turbulent flow of time. Of course, Xiao Hua wasn't surprised at all by this situation. Furthermore, he wasn't alarmed but happy instead. The existence of the turbulent flow of time made it clear that he wanted to leave the ruins, leave the star field where the ruins were located. In other words, he wanted to leave the upper realm where the primordial spirit was cultivated and return to the hidden immortal continent where he was familiar with cultivating the nascent soul. However, when the four walls of the teleportation channel slowly became transparent, the green seal characters, runes, and even the fluctuations of magic power were slowly erased. Xiao Hua himself was distorted to the point where he was almost unrecognizable. Perhaps he was just like a light shadow or a fluctuation. Only then did Xiao Hua start to feel fear. At this moment, his magic power disappeared, his divine sense disappeared, his soul consciousness disappeared, and the soul technique that controlled the teleportation channel disappeared. Even his thoughts were slowly being pulled out. His eyes were pitch black. A deathly stillness that was even quieter than the heavenly prison began to pass through his body and rush into his mind. He couldn't control his own body, and he couldn't control his steps even more. A kind of ignorant terror pervaded Xiao Hua's heart. He was like a mortal walking alone in a pitch-black mountain in the middle of a pitch-black night. Xiao Hua was fearful of the unknown things in front of him. What is that? Just when Xiao Hua was feeling helpless, in the boundless darkness, he saw a hazy brilliance. A ribbon of light appeared in Xiao Hua's vision. This light knot was very strange. It was like a complete ribbon of light that was cut off. Moreover, it twisted at the place where it was cut off and reconnected again. Above this time knot, rays of light that were as bright as swimming fish flickered and surged. These rays of light didn't need to leave one side of the light knot and could easily flow to the other side. Xiao Hua was a little dumbstruck by this sight. Seeing the light knot, Xiao Hua's figure suddenly sped up. His distorted figure was even more like a light shadow being cut apart, turning into pieces. Ah! Could it be that I'm still in the teleportation channel? Xiao Hua suddenly came to a realization. But in this space-time turbulence, I can no longer see the teleportation channel. Just when Xiao Hua came to a realization, he suddenly lowered his head again. He pulled his gaze away from the vision in the distance and looked at his own body. At this time, his body was no longer in shape. It had already turned into pieces of light shadows. These light shadows didn't follow any rules. Moreover, as the teleportation channel sped up, these light shadows were cut again, turning into smaller light shadows. This happened a few times. Before the light knot, Xiao Hua's figure was already formed from small particles. Xiao Hua suddenly had a flash of inspiration. He recalled the time when he followed Fairy Hongxia into the ancestral shrine star in the millions of Meng Mountains. At that time, didn't he turn into a particle? Could it be that, by turning into a particle, I can fly faster? Could it be that in this star field, only the particle form is the best state to fly? Xiao Hua's almost stagnant mind rumbled as he thought of his light escape. Allowing the body to be light is an escape. Light is formless and intangible. How can I allow the body to be light? Since light can shine in this star field, could it be that light is also in the form of particles? Xiao Hua seemed to have touched the door of light escape. Unfortunately, he didn't have time to think about it because his figure was really like a lightning bolt, rushing towards the huge light knot. In just a moment, Xiao Hua had already arrived in front of the light knot. On the contrary, when he got closer, Xiao Hua could no longer see the shape of the light knot. He could only see that the light knot was vast and boundless. On one side of the light knot, there was a tide of light more majestic than the sea surging violently. Every time it moved, there would be endless fluctuations rushing out from the light spot. Xiao Hua was very familiar with these fluctuations. They were the fluctuations of time in the heavenly prison. Although Xiao Hua's ears couldn't hear any sound, the rumbling sound that reached the heavens and earth resounded in his heart. This sound could almost destroy all the sounds in the world. How is this possible? Xiao Hua was dumbstruck as he looked at the miracle between heaven and earth. Even in the incomparably mysterious heavenly prison, all he could see was the brilliance produced by the intersection of several different time domains. This brilliance was already extremely rare and had already benefited him greatly. He had never thought that besides the heavenly prison, in this mysterious space, there would actually be time turbulence that surpassed the heavenly prison's time domain. And what made him especially puzzled was that the mark of the Great Snow Mountain's spiritual sense that he sensed was actually within the chaotic and incomprehensible time turbulence. Moreover, his spiritual sense mark was like a candle in the wind, not far nor near. Damn it, it must be the law of time. Xiao Hua suddenly understood. Only the law of time can surpass the law of space and allow the spiritual sense mark of the Great Snow Mountain to maintain a constant distance. Could it be that the 3 continents are within the light knot? The 3 continents are actually so mysterious. As Xiao Hua pondered, his figure once again rushed into the knot of light. As Xiao Hua's speed increased, strange lights and shadows flashed before his eyes like lightning. Within these lights and shadows, there were endless illusions. There were continents, mountains, rivers, and battles of life and death. All kinds of strange and motley things appeared one after another in the lights and shadows. Boom! When Xiao Hua crashed into the knot of light, countless voices once again rushed into his mind. Of course, these voices were merely like thunder, and after flashing past, they immediately became silent. Moreover, around Xiao Hua's body that had already turned into particles, endless light dots drowned Xiao Hua like a tide of light. It was as if only Xiao Hua existed in this world at this time. Sensing that every particle on his body was emitting a kind of fluctuation, Xiao Hua really wanted to cry but had no tears. He wanted to take this opportunity to comprehend some of the law of time, but the chaotic fluctuations of time made him want to comprehend until he died. Another few moments later, this tide of light produced a small vortex. This vortex gradually condensed into a flow of time as Xiao Hua went deeper, wantonly flowing in the light knot. The three continents. Seeing an indistinct continent that seemed to be formed by countless illusions superimposed together in the flow of time, Xiao Hua cried out in alarm, "It must be. Otherwise, how could this Xiao's divine sense mark appear on it?" However, in just a moment, Xiao Hua wanted to cry but had no tears. His thoughts were as slow as a crawling snail. Damn it, with such a chaotic flow of time, even if this Xiao returned to the Great Snow Mountain, then who knows when in the hidden immortal continent. Maybe 1,000,000 years ago, maybe 1,000,000 years later. What's the point of this Xiao going back to the hidden immortal continent like this? Unfortunately, even if Xiao Hua didn't want to go back, his body that had almost turned into a light shadow still quickly crashed into the continent. Just as he approached one of the illusions on the continent, suddenly, his body of 13,200 particles slightly shook, and the transmission array that had disappeared in the flow of time suddenly reappeared. As if it had bumped into something, it suddenly became unstable. Moreover, just as his body was trembling, a vague image of light and shadow appeared amidst the myriad of light and shadow. -13. Chapter 4181. In this light, a tall and thin figure appeared. At this moment, this figure was lying helplessly, as if he had already fainted. On the left side of this figure, there was a black puppy and a yellow marten. What made Xiao Hua especially shocked was that this tall and thin figure's right hand was tightly gripping a sword embryo that he was familiar with. Before Xiao Hua could see clearly, the light and shadow shook again, and an indescribable ripple extended behind this figure. It was similar to the ripples of Xiao Hua's transmission channel. If nothing unexpected happened, Xiao Hua's transmission channel should have collided with the transmission channel that this figure was in, causing an abnormality to occur. The light and shadow shook once, and then the light and shadow disappeared, as if the entire light and shadow had fallen into the forward ripple. The brilliance of the grand cosmos shifting token in Xiao Hua's hand shook again, smoothing out the somewhat collapsed transmission channel. As a result, the light and shadow of the transmission channel that Xiao Hua was in also immediately disappeared into the torrent of time. Xiao Hua was dumbstruck like a wooden chicken. His already slow mind could no longer keep up with what he had just seen. Although it was just a glance and he didn't see anything clearly, he could clearly feel that the figure was so familiar. The little dog and the little marten were also familiar, and there was also that sword embryo. However, he didn't have time to think too much. Another kind of fear arose in his heart. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua's voice shouted in his physical body, "Not good. The divine sense mark has disappeared." Xiao Hua was shocked. That's right, the divine sense mark that had been faintly discernible before had completely disappeared now. He couldn't sense it at all. It was as if the divine sense mark didn't exist at all. This situation was exactly the same as when Xiao Hua had mistakenly entered the ruins. What should we do? Soul cultivator Xiao Hua was somewhat at a loss. Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed slightly. Looking at the endless illusory continent in front of him, he made a prompt decision and said, "Forget it. We're in the turbulent flow of time, so we're doomed. We can only survive by entering the three continent. Use the going south, going north, going south, going south, going north, going south." All right. Hearing this, the soul cultivator Xiao Hua hurriedly urged his soul warrior to activate. Thousands of green seal words flew out and disappeared into the flow of time. But as the green seal words disappeared, Xiao Hua's portal continued to move closer to the continent. Mountain ranges and villas could be seen clearly in front of him. Suddenly, an indescribable barrier appeared in front of Xiao Hua, preventing him from entering the portal. What's going on? Xiao Hua was about to cry. How come the three continents don't recognize me? This Xiao has only been away for a few days. Calm down, Fellow Daoist, Xiaohua said. We'll try again. Although he was a bit flustered, he forced himself to remain calm. Yes. Clenching his teeth, Xiaohua's soul tendrils flew out from his forehead and surged into the barrier in an attempt to break through. Unfortunately, he didn't know what this barrier was, but it was incomparably tough. No matter how hard Xiaohua tried, he couldn't break through it. Xiaohua could only watch as the continent flashed past his eyes like lightning. Motherfucker! I don't believe this. Xiaohua slapped his forehead and opened his illusion breaker Dharma eye. A round of silver-white pupils appeared, and before the silver-white beam of light could shoot out, the incomparably tough barrier suddenly disappeared. Xiaohua's figure flashed in the light and disappeared into the light and shadow of the continent. However, at this moment, the entire world where Xiaohua was located just happened to turn from one side of the boundless light knot to the other, and the light tide that was rushing up started to fall down like a waterfall on the other side. Just a moment later, another shadow appeared within the light tide. The unconscious figures of Sakura, Yu Mingxin, Yang Haoya, and Huan Wuxin appeared again. At this moment, the demonic horn on Sakura's forehead emitted an extremely dim fluctuation. This fluctuation protected the three of them. When the fluctuation dissipated, the three of them also crashed into one of the shadows on the continent. Seeing that he had crashed into a continent's light, Xiaohua's heart was suddenly in suspense. And at this time, his eyes swayed. The feeling of dizziness that he hadn't felt for a long time actually appeared. The entire continent was spinning in front of his eyes. Xiaohua was shocked. Because the divine sense mark of the snowy mountain had disappeared, his transfer array didn't have a specific location. If he spun like this, he was afraid that he would fall into the same place as the heavenly prison. At that time, he really wanted to cry but had no tears. Xiaohua hurriedly urged his soul technique. Fortunately, his soul tendrils were like his trembling heart. While protecting Xiaohua, they also extended towards the continent. But after a few breaths, the spinning stopped and all the light disappeared. The familiar transfer array appeared in front of Xiaohua's eyes again. This transfer array was shaking rapidly, as if it was about to collapse. Moreover, in this passage, there were still some faint fragments of time flowing faintly. Good. Seeing the transfer array appear in front of his eyes, Xiaohua understood that he had already come out from the chaotic flow of time. Right now, he was about to land on the snowy mountain. Unfortunately, it was still too early for Xiaohua to be happy. Before he could even clap his hands, a loud rumbling sound resounded by Xiaohua's ears. A teleportation force that could flatten a mountain was similarly transmitted from the teleportation passageway. Not only was the teleportation passageway extremely deflated, even the brilliance of the Grand Universe teleportation token shattered with a PU sound. Not good. Xiaohua hurriedly slapped his head. Boom! A tricolored brilliance spurted out, transforming into a huge lotus that protected his body. At the same time, thousands of soul tendrils flew out from between his eyebrows and landed on the transfer array. One by one, thumb-sized green seal script appeared in the soul tendrils, trying to stabilize the transfer array. Creak, creak, creak. A series of dull sounds came from the left side of Xiaohua. It was as if a tattered wooden door was being blown by the wind and shattered. Puff 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 puff. The transfer array behind Xiaohua was the same as before, continuously exploding. Xiaohua looked at the torn space and couldn't help but groan. Damn it, I have become enemies with the transfer array. Every time, it seems like I can't teleport to the place normally. Looks like this time, I don't know who will be trampled under my feet again. Can't we use another method to return to the snowy mountain? Although Xiaohua was resentful, he began to try his best to maintain the stability of the transfer array. However, the spatial transformation power in this torrent of time was so strong that it was far from what Xiaohua, a human cultivator, could control. He was like a young boy, using his hand to support a large rock while walking on a rope in the air. On one hand, he had to maintain balance, on the other, he had to use all his strength. Boom! Finally, after persisting for a while, Xiaohua was unable to maintain the transfer array. The green seal script that came in contact with the transfer array shattered one by one, and the soul tendrils connected to the seal script also broke inch by inch. The entire transfer array collapsed with a rumble. Xiao Hua hurriedly slapped his forehead when he saw countless grey lightning bolts flashing in the air and glass shards slicing through the space around him. A fist-sized silver-white beam of light shot out of his delusion breaker eye and landed among the shards. Catcher! Within the pillar of light, all the fragments were shattered, and then a vortex of several meters in size was formed. The entire space was torn apart by this vortex. Before Xiao Hua could sweep out with his divine sense, another huge rumble resounded, and a huge pushing force appeared behind him. It was as if the void had kicked him in the butt, and he was forcefully kicked out. This force was so fierce and sudden that Xiao Hua only had time to urge his true qi to protect his body. He didn't have time to use the lightning escape technique, and his entire body rushed into the sky. Xiao Hua's body abruptly appeared in the sky above the continent. Apart from the ripples in the sky that slowly spread in all directions like water waves, no one knew where he came from, let alone that he had passed through the rare chaotic flow of time between heaven and earth. Perhaps the only thing that could be seen was the tricolored light shining on his body. He was also dragging a tail that looked like thick smoke behind him. He was whistling as he shot toward the mountain peak below at an extremely high speed. Strange whining noises could be heard in the sky as well. Immediately after, with a long pu, Xiao Hua's body crashed into a mountain peak like a meteor, and disappeared without a trace. This sound was so loud that it scared some of the strange birds nearby, and none of them couldn't help but flap their wings and fly away. The cries of these birds and beasts sounded extremely chaotic under the clear sky. Even though the scorching sun in the sky shone brightly, it still couldn't cover up this mess. At this moment, the nameless continent welcomed an inexplicable uninvited guest. Boom! In just a short moment, the entire mountain peak was shaking. Xiao Hua's body flew out from the mountain rocks, and the light protecting his body flickered, blocking all the dust and gravel to the side. Damn it! Xiao Hua flew while shouting cheerfully, "Snowy Mountain, this daddy is back. Sun Hao, wait for this daddy to flatten your nose." However, when Xiao Hua saw the mountain peak in front of him clearly, and then looked at the scene around him, he couldn't help but be stunned on the spot. He saw that this was a mountain peak that was more than 10,000 feet tall, and it was covered with huge mountain rocks. Between the mountain rocks, there were some strange ancient trees. These ancient trees were also huge, and different from what Xiao Hua usually saw. They were actually somewhat similar to the ancient trees in the Dragon Island's folded Jade Legacy realm. Moreover, on the left side of the mountain peak, the mountain range was like a horned dragon crouching on the ground. It stretched as far as the eye could see, and the entire earth was dyed green and yellow by these mountain ranges, brimming with a kind of vicissitudes and desolation. This is the Snowy Mountain? Xiao Hua's eyes were filled with doubt, and he muttered to himself, could it be that this Xiao's previous guess became a reality? Although this Xiao returned to the Western Paradise, but it wasn't the time when this Xiao left, but a long time ago or a long time later. -13. Chapter 4182. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua's heart moved, and he hurriedly looked at the sky. It was noon, and a white sun was hanging there. It was not the three suns of the ruins. Fortunately, seeing this scene, Xiao Hua sighed in relief and thought to himself, no matter what, I've returned to the three continents. I've left the ruins and escaped from the great desolate star storm. Who cares what time it is in the three continents? As he thought about this, Xiao Hua released his divine perception to explore the surroundings again. However, as he looked around, he frowned again. This was because the surroundings of this mountain were completely different from the Great Snow Mountain in his impression. Even the mountain itself was different from the Great Snow Mountain. Even within 10,000 li, there was no mountain similar to the Great Snow Mountain. Perhaps, the world has changed, and the Great Snow Mountain of the past is too far away, and the Great Snow Mountain has not formed yet. Xiao Hua comforted himself. Then, Xiao Hua urged his body, preparing to teleport to the left to continue exploring. However, just as his body swayed, he stopped again. He looked at the surroundings in disbelief, but he saw that the heaven and earth origin qi was extremely rich, more abundant than any heavenly abode that Xiao Hua had seen before. The heaven and earth origin qi in many places was about to condense into droplet. It can't be. Xiao Hua's heart thumped, and he had a bad feeling. Although the Pure Land is the Buddhist sect's territory, and my Dao sect's cultivators rarely cultivate there, but it's impossible to have such rich heaven and earth origin qi in the vicinity of the Great Snow Mountain. Even thinking of this, Xiao Hua immediately slapped the top of his head, and his innate true qi turned into 5 qi unifications and rushed into the air. Xiao Hua's expression changed greatly, because although there was noble qi in the heaven and earth origin qi, this noble qi was abnormally pure, and there was no Confucian aura at all. It did not even have the kind of mortal aura that Confucian cultivators needed to cultivate. Is this the ancient times? Xiao Hua came to a realization, and hurriedly looked around again. Sure enough, the mountain rocks on the mountain peak were huge, and the ancient trees were also huge. Even the grass on the mountain rocks looked similar to Xiao Hua's height. It really looked like the great desolate world of the ruins. Xiao Hua was completely dumbfounded, and he stood in the air, looking at the great desolate world around him. His lips moved, but in the end, he did not say anything. At this moment, his heart felt empty, like a cloud floating in the sky without anything to rely on. Originally, he had the opportunity to stay in the ruins and even establish a sect in the ruins. However, he didn't stay. He found many excuses for himself in his heart. For example, the cultivators of the ruins cultivated the primordial spirit while he cultivated the nascent soul. It was not suitable for him to stay in the ruins. However, in reality, the Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua cultivated the primordial spirit. Why couldn't Xiao Hua cultivate it himself? Moreover, even if Xiao Hua cultivates his nascent soul, his scattered soul can also cultivate his primordial spirit. For example, if the ruins were to be destroyed by the prehistoric starstorm, Xiao Hua would have no choice but to leave the ruins. However, in reality, since Wu Tian had the confidence to avoid the prehistoric starstorm, why couldn't Xiao Hua avoid it? Among all the cultivators in the ruins, Xiao Hua was probably the only one who was truly qualified and had the strength to avoid the starburst, right? All excuses were just excuses. They couldn't hide Xiao Hua's desire to return to the hidden immortal mainland. This desire was not only for the revival of the Dao sect, not only for Xin Xin, but also for the possibility of meeting Fairy Hongxia again. However, time played a huge joke on Xiao Hua. He did find the spiritual will mark he left behind in the Great Snow Mountain. Moreover, he did try his best to return to the ultimate land of bliss. However, this ultimate land of bliss was not his ultimate land of bliss. It was the ancient ultimate land of bliss. It belonged to the ancient ultimate land of bliss where Taoism, Buddhism, Confucianism and demons fought for supremacy. The people he was familiar with and the things he was familiar with had all become the smoke of the future. Whether it was Fairy Hongxia or Xin Xin, they did not exist in this mainland. The indescribable depression was like a dark cloud that covered Xiao Hua's empty heart. However, even if it was a dark cloud, Xiao Hua's mind was also slowly floating and rising. At this moment, Xiao Hua didn't want to think about anything and didn't want to do anything. It was as if he was extremely tired and wanted to rest. He allowed his mind to float up. The higher he flew, the farther he could see. The ancient desolate land turned into a sand table in Xiao Hua's eyes. Although this sand table was boundless, the mountain peak was already like a pellet. Unfortunately, this scene was nothing to the current Xiao Hua. He came from the earth, fire, wind, and thunder realms and had already seen the ninth heaven. He didn't care about this simple bird's eye view. The land was far away, so the starry sky was naturally close. Above Xiao Hua's mind, in the sky, the sun star and the moon star were hanging opposite each other. Countless bright stars were like eyes, blinking at Xiao Hua. The truth of heaven and earth contained in the stars also fell into Xiao Hua's mind in the blink of an eye. Seeing this starry sky, Xiao Hua of the heavenly Tao immediately trembled. Comprehension poured into Xiao Hua's mind like a flood, as if a blocked dam had suddenly been opened. Wang, Wang, Wang. Xiao Hua's mind gradually turned into a jade archive in the sky, allowing thousands of inexplicable fluctuations to fall into it. In the starry sky, all the stars gave birth to halos, and billions of starlight from the other realms fell into jade archive Xiao Hua's body. Xiao Hua's mind was filled with a kind of perfection similar to a reunion after a long separation. Whether it was Xiao Hua's Tao cultivation or Confucian cultivation, all of his divine abilities grew rapidly in this perfection. Perhaps it was an instant, perhaps it was millions of years. Even Xiao Hua didn't know when it flew out from the space. That big hand seemed to want to grab the stars in the sky and directly grab at the starry sky. All of a sudden, Jade Archive Xiao Hua's body trembled. All of his astral energy disappeared, and all of his comprehension was annihilated. Even the image of Jade Archive Xiao Hua disappeared, leaving only Xiao Hua's mind staring at the starry sky in a daze. An uncontrollable ecstasy ignited the hope in his heart. He muttered to himself, "No, this is not the ultimate paradise. The ultimate paradise's starry sky is not like this. This starry sky. I seem to have seen it before. Moreover, this starry sky is engraved with the first stroke of my comprehension of the heavenly Tao. This is perhaps the place I have been bitterly searching for." Xiao Hua's mind just had some comprehension, but suddenly, a kind of extreme terror emerged from the bottom of his heart. He couldn't help but look at a certain place in the starry sky. Over there, a strange distortion was slowly taking shape. Not good. Xiao Hua's mind was startled, and he immediately fell from the sky into his body. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and looked at the starry sky that was already gone, and he secretly shouted, "Could it be, there is an enemy that can kill this Xiao? Did that enemy just happen to pass by, or did he follow me here? Could it be a demon lord from the demon realm?" Thinking of this, Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent, and he hurriedly invited the green-robed Xiao Hua out of the space. Without waiting for the green-robed Xiao Hua to see the situation clearly, he immediately asked, "Green-robed fellow Daoist, I want to ask you, can other people use the teleportation array that you and I set up in the ruins?" The green-robed Xiao Hua was startled, and then he sensed the panic and doubt in Xiao Hua's heart, and he hurriedly replied, "Let me tell you, fellow Daoist, that teleportation array is activated by a soul technique, and it can only be used when combined with the way south opposite north technique, and it doesn't require primordial stones. Therefore, other than fellow Daoist, other people can't use it. Moreover, fellow Daoist, don't forget that there is no teleportation array here that is connected to that teleportation array, so how can other people use it?" If that's the case, I can be at ease. Xiao Hua nodded. In that case, I's warning sign is probably not an enemy chasing after us, but the power of heaven and earth similar to the great desolate starstorm. It should be. The green-robed Xiao Hua said with a smile, "If this is the great desolate star and not the ancient ultimate paradise, then it means that we are still in the upper realm. With our origins, how can we still have enemies in the upper realm? If the demon venerable chases after us, it's also possible." Xiao Hua still didn't feel at ease and replied, "Big brother, don't be afraid." The devil spirit Xiao Hua said, "The demon venerable won't come out unless there is a great temptation. Everything about Big Brother hasn't been exposed, so the demon venerable won't have any ideas about Big Brother. Moreover, Little Brother is currently devouring the devil spirit of the demon array. Previously, when Big Brother was comprehending, Little Brother had already devoured more than half of it. After devouring for another 100 years, Little Brother will also be able to surpass the Demon Emperor, and at that time, maybe I can also become a Demon Venerable. 100 years. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. It would be good if it was 100 years. I's warning sign is too powerful, and all the previous warnings can't be compared to it, even the heavenly prison can't be compared to it. Therefore, I'm afraid I can't wait 100 years. Then what should we do? The devil spirit Xiao Hua was somewhat dumbfounded. I is very familiar with the starry sky of this place, and it's different from the Western paradise. Perhaps I also stayed here before I was stranded in the Dawn Rain continent. Xiao Hua said in a low voice, "It's also because I cultivated here that this place has the divine sense mark that I left behind, so, the divine sense mark that I sensed in the ruins was here, and not the Great Snow Mountain. Even I suspect that the divine sense mark that I sensed in the heavenly prison was also here. Yes, it must be so. The soul cultivator Xiao Hua also said, otherwise, fellow Daoist wouldn't feel that the divine sense mark is somewhat unfamiliar. If that's the case, we can use the soul cultivation technique again to sense the divine sense mark of the Great Snow Mountain, and then teleport back from here, Xiao Hua said with slight hesitation. As soon as he said that, the green-robed Xiao Hua shook his head slightly again and said, fellow Daoist, I think you already have some awareness in your heart. Things may not be as simple as you say. From here, or from the ruins, it's not a simple teleportation array that can reach the Western Paradise. Alas. Xiao Hua sighed and frowned. Fellow Daoist is right. The 3 continents are the lower realm, and the ruins are the upper realm. If there's no accident, this place should be an upper realm similar to the ruins. A simple teleportation array can't break the barrier between the 2 realms and teleport us back. The heavenly prison on the hidden immortal continent, if I guessed correctly, should be a spatial crack in the upper realm. Because this crack belongs to the upper realm, it's filled with time fragments, and no cultivator from the 3 continents can survive inside. -13. Chapter 4183. Are you kidding me? Xiao Hua was a little dumbfounded. Looking at the stone giant that was more than 10 zhong tall, he thought to himself, this thing can actually cry? Or perhaps, this isn't crying. But if this isn't crying, then what is it? However, looking at the stone giant's slightly trembling shoulders and trembling legs, it didn't seem to be fake. Xiao Hua suddenly had a kind of realization, damn it, although this guy looks huge, could it be that he's still a child? Thinking that he actually bullied a child, Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel ashamed. He raised his hand and picked up the stone giant's finger that fell on the stone platform, brought it in front of the stone giant, and lightly poked his arm. That finger wasn't much different from a stone, but there was some warm flow of fire inside. When the finger touched the stone giant's arm, it made a ka sound, exactly like a stone hitting a stone. The stone giant stared blankly, revealing a somewhat red eye from inside his arm. At this moment, the panic in his eyes had already disappeared, replaced by grievance. Moreover, seeing his broken finger, the stone giant once again burst into tears, no different from an injured child. Ari, it really is a child. Xiao Hua sighed. He waved his hand, and the broken finger once again poked the stone giant. Only then did the stone giant slightly listen to the crying. He curiously looked at Xiao Hua and reached out to take it. Then, the stone giant saw that Xiao Hua's expression was very kind and didn't have any evil intentions. Then, he looked at the empty space under Xiao Hua's feet. Although there were tears in his eyes, he still opened his mouth, pointed at Xiao Hua's feet, and cried. Then, Xiao Hua of course didn't understand what he was saying. He only shook his head and said, little guy, could it be that you don't know how to speak? Then. The stone giant still said the same 2 words. Presumably, these 2 words were all he could say. I guess he hasn't grown up yet, so he doesn't know how to speak. Xiao Hua bitterly smiled, not to mention that he doesn't understand what I'm saying. After thinking for a moment, Xiao Hua asked again, little guy, where are you from? I'll bring you back, okay? Then. The stone giant didn't say anything else. Xiao Hua was somewhat helpless. He thought for a moment and took out a few fire attribute top-grade primeval stones from his bosom. However, when he handed them over to the stone giant, Xiao Hua was careful and changed these top-grade primeval stones into low-grade primeval stones. Sure enough, when the stone giant saw these yuan stones, he was extremely happy. He hurriedly extended his arm to ask Xiao Hua for them. After he placed the yuan stones into his mouth and chewed them with crunching sounds, his large mouth opened and a smile appeared. However, this smile was reflected in the hot magma at the corner of his eyes, making it appear somewhat strange. Then, after the stone giant finished eating the primordial stone, it seemed as if it still wanted more. It raised its hand and asked for more. It was completely like a child who had seen snacks in the secular world. Xiao Hua smiled as he shook his head, placing several origin stones into his hand. At this moment, a faint sound came from the distant mountain valley. Although this sound was very soft, it traveled extremely far due to the mountain wind. Hearing this sound, the stone giant's face tensed up and he hurriedly looked up at the sky. At this moment, the sun had already set and the moon had yet to rise. The bright stars in the sky were already hanging in the night sky. Seeing that it was late, the stone giant couldn't help but panic. When he stood up, he hesitated for a moment. The fingers on his left hand were broken and he had just fallen down, so he seemed to have some lingering fear. Moreover, the night was shrouded and the entire mountain peak couldn't be seen clearly. The stone giant didn't dare to rashly go down. Then, the stone giant anxiously opened its mouth and shouted towards the distance. Xiao Hua wasn't in a hurry to help. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and raised his head to look at the sky. The stars in the sky were exactly the same as what he saw during the day. However, when he looked at them now, the feeling was completely different. During the day, it was mostly comprehension. During the night, it was mostly warmth and memories. It was a somewhat distant warmth and feelings. In addition, when he saw the childish actions of the stone giant, the weakness in Xiao Hua's heart was immediately touched. It was as if the entire starry sky was his home. His unfamiliarity with this continent was instantly reduced by more than half. This place must have a close relationship with this Xiao. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and let the night wind blow his daoist robe up. He wantonly enjoyed this kind of warmth. He let the gradually rising moonlight sprinkle on his body like water. It was just like that night when it sprinkled on the small house in the mountain village. Then, a hurried call woke Xiao Hua up. This voice was filled with anxiety and concern. Xiao Hua, who was feeling emotional, immediately heard it. Although it was only 2 words, it was overflowing with affection. Xiao Hua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He seemed to have understood something. Could it be, this stone giant's family can only say 2 words? Then, the small stone giant on the mountainside also replied. The stone giant at the foot of the mountain sped up its then, as if it was scolding. Then, the small stone giant replied a few times, feeling wronged. It sat down again and stuck its head out to look at the darkness at the foot of the mountain. After a long time, a stone giant that was several times larger than the small stone giant carefully climbed from the darkness at the foot of the mountain to the stone wall illuminated by the moonlight. At this moment, the stone giant sped up again and quickly climbed up to the stone platform. Then, the small stone giant had already made way for the stone giant. When it saw the stone giant climb up, it immediately pounced on it. Then, it shouted. The stone giant originally raised its arm as if it wanted to hit the small stone giant. However, when it saw the small stone giant hugging it, it gently lowered its arm and patted the small stone giant's back as if to comfort it. Then, after a while, the stone giant opened its mouth and asked. The small stone giant stuck its head out of the stone giant's chest and pointed at the high mountain cave. It explained again, then. In the distance, Xiao Hua really didn't understand. Why did these 2 words contain so much information? Then. The stone giant was obviously worried about its child and hid in the cave. When it saw the small stone giant's left hand missing a finger, its expression changed greatly and it interrupted the small stone giant's words. The small stone giant took out its broken finger and pointed at Xiao Hua, who was not far away. It shouted, then. When the stone giant heard this, it turned pale with fright and hurriedly looked at Xiao Hua. Then, without any hesitation, it put the small stone giant behind it and shouted, then. This time, the stone giant's voice was hurried and carried a hint of threat. Xiao Hua immediately understood the meaning of these words. Seeing the fire in the stone giant's eyes, Xiao Hua smiled faintly. His figure floated a few feet away and looked at the stone giant indifferently. Then, the small stone giant behind the stone giant said a few words in a low voice. The stone giant also asked a few words, then, it slowly relaxed its guard. It actually put its palms together and respectfully bowed to Xiao Hua to thank him. Seeing the stone giant's very standard Buddhist gesture, Xiao Hua was dumbfounded again. He couldn't help but ask, "Sir, on this continent, is there a Buddhist sect?" Then. The stone giant obviously didn't understand what he was saying and still used 2 words to reply. "Sigh, forget it." Xiao Hua was helpless and didn't answer. Then, the small stone giant took out the fire element primordial stone and showed it to the stone giant. The stone giant nodded and looked at Xiao Hua. It pointed at the fire element primordial stone and then pointed at itself. Xiao Hua understood and took out a few more fire element primordial stones and gave them to the stone giant. However, the stone giant waved its hand, indicating that it didn't want them. Then, the stone giant put the small stone giant on its shoulder and beckoned to Xiao Hua. It then slowly descended from the stone platform to the foot of the mountain. Xiao Hua didn't think too much. He raised his eyes and looked at the familiar starry sky. His figure followed the stone giant as it descended. He understood that this continent was full of mysteries. This stone giant was probably the key to opening this mysterious door. The stone giant carefully climbed down from the mountain peak and looked at Xiao Hua, who was standing in the air behind it. Its big mouth cracked open as if it was smiling. Then, it took a big step forward. Dong, dong, dong sounds could be heard from the ground. The stone giant took big strides and ran towards a place in the valley. The small stone giant was lying on the stone giant's back. It seemed that it was overly frightened and had fallen into a deep sleep. Its vertical eyes were tightly shut. The stone giant walked for more than 100 li. However, this distance was nothing in the huge mountain range. It didn't even cross 2 mountain ranges. However, after crossing a broken mountain foothill, the stone giant's figure clearly slowed down. Moreover, the sound of its footsteps also became a lot softer. Under the moonlight, the stone giant's eyes flashed with flames from time to time, as if it was on guard against something. Woo! Just when the stone giant turned its head and wanted to warn Xiao Hua, a strange sound suddenly came from a corner of the mountain foothill. Xiao Hua raised his head indifferently and saw a strange bird that was dozens of zhong in size. It looked like a huge rock rolling down from the night sky. When it got close to the stone giant, it spread its wings and a sharp claw that was several zhong in size appeared on its abdomen and grabbed towards the stone giant's back. The stone giant was obviously startled. Its one eye that was already on guard immediately opened. A reddish-yellow pillar of fire shot out from its one eye and attacked the strange bird. Pu. That strange bird was also extremely powerful. Its sharp claw grabbed the air. Without any magic power fluctuation, it directly grabbed the pillar of fire into 2. Moreover, when the strange bird flapped its wings, pitch-black water droplets fell from its wings like rain. Pa! They fell on the stone giant and the small stone giant. ZZZ, ZZZ, ZZZ. The pitch-black water droplets fell on the 2 stone giants' bodies and immediately emitted a corrosive sound. It was like cold water falling on hot oil. -13. Chapter 4184. Then. The little stone giant, who was originally sleeping soundly, immediately woke up from the pain and couldn't help but scream loudly. Then. The stone giant hurriedly shouted in a low voice. Then, he suddenly gave up fighting with the strange birds and fled in another direction. On his body and the little stone giant's body, the water droplets splashed by the strange birds corroded thumb-sized deep holes. Sure enough, as soon as the stone giant took off, a dozen strange cries came from the foothills. Caw. A flock of strange birds flew out. The largest of these birds were 1,000 feet long, while the smallest was 100 feet long. They flapped their wings and pounced on the stone giant. Even a few strange birds noticed Xiao Hua and turned their heads to pounce on him. The stone giant ran for more than 100 steps before he saw a huge rock in front of him. Without any hesitation, he threw the little stone giant into the huge rock and bent down to pick up a huge rock that was more than 100 feet in size. He shouted, then. He raised his arms and the huge rock let out a howl and charged toward the strange bird at the front. Puff! The strange bird was caught off guard. It spat out a pitch-black liquid from its mouth and hurriedly flapped its wings to dodge. Sizzle. The liquid in the strange bird's mouth was very corrosive. When it fell on the huge rock, it corroded a big hole in it. However, the huge rock came too fast for the strange bird to dodge. With a loud bang, the huge rock hit the strange bird's head. The strange bird's body was immediately sent flying by the huge rock and fell to the ground with a loud bang. It also let out a mournful cry. While the stone giant was delayed, the dozen strange birds had already flown close. Swish swish. The dozen pairs of wings flapped and water droplets fell, covering the stone giant. Then, the stone giant shouted and squatted down again. He picked up the huge rocks on the ground and threw them into the sky without looking back. Boom, boom. The huge rocks flew into the sky one after another. Because the stone giant's rocks were aimless, other than the first few that hit the strange birds, the rest were all useless. After the group of strange birds dispersed, they rushed towards the stone giant from all directions. The rain-like water droplets continued to fall from all directions. The stone giant's body emitted sizzling sounds. Xiao Hua could clearly see that the stone giant's forehead was dripping with magma-like sweat. Its mouth was also tightly stretched. At that moment, in the distance, the small stone giant had only managed to utter a single word before it stopped. It was as if it had forcefully swallowed it back in. The stone giant was shocked. He raised his head and saw the little stone giant's yellow eyes filled with determination and forbearance. On top of the huge rock, a strange bird was flapping its wings and attacking the little stone giant with water droplets. Then, the stone giant's heart ached. He knew that the little stone giant was injured. He wanted to cry out in pain, but he was afraid that he would be distracted, so he forced himself to endure. The stone giant shouted loudly. He picked up a huge rock in each hand and threw it towards the strange bird that was attacking the little stone giant. At the same time, his single eye that had been holding back suddenly emitted a red light. A pillar of fire shot out from his eye with a loud bang. Caw! Seeing the two huge rocks coming towards it, the strange bird let out a long cry and spread its wings to escape. However, the stone giant's two huge rocks were also ingenious. They didn't directly hit the strange bird's body. Instead, one hit the strange bird's head and the other hit the strange bird's tail. The strange bird couldn't escape forward or backward. The strange bird was stunned for a moment, but it also calmly responded. Its whole body strangely flew horizontally, and the water droplets on its wings took advantage of the momentum to hit the stone giant. However, before the water droplets could land, the stone giant's pillar of fire had already arrived. It landed right in the middle of the two huge rocks, where the body of the bird was sandwiched by the huge rock. The strange bird was shocked. It tried its best to hit the huge rocks, wanting to escape. However, the stone giant's pillar of fire hit at the perfect time. Sizzle. There was also a chaotic sound. The strange bird's water droplets were extinguished by the pillar of fire. The pillar of fire crazily crashed into the strange bird's body. Not only did it ignite the strange bird's feathers, but it also pierced through the strange bird's body. The strange bird only had time to let out a low cry before its entire body turned into a fireball and fell to the ground. Then, after killing the strange bird, the stone giant didn't dare to be negligent. Its body agilely pounced on the small stone giant. Looking at the strange birds behind the stone giant, they were still orderly before. However, when they saw the stone giant's pillar of fire and the strange bird's fireball hit, they all went crazy. They flapped their wings crazily and pounced on the two stone giants. Woo 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 woo. The stone giant landed beside the small stone giant and hugged it. Immediately after, a yellow halo appeared around its body. Then, as the stone giant fled to the side of the foothill, the 3 fingers on its right arm moved rapidly. Stones that weren't particularly large were driven by the stone giant and flew into the air. The strength of these stones wasn't as great as before, but there were many of them. The stone giant's goal was obviously to disrupt and not kill. Sure enough, the strange birds were very afraid of these stones. They scattered in all directions, giving the stone giant time to escape. However, the stone giant's running speed was far slower than that of the strange birds. In just half the time it took to eat a meal, the stone giant was forced to a stone wall by the strange birds. Seeing dozens of strange birds fiercely pouncing on it, some of them even spitting out pitch-black liquid from their mouths, the stone giant looked up to the sky and shouted, then. His voice was very miserable. Then, after spitting out another pillar of fire from its eyes, the stone giant turned around and covered the small stone giant under its body, exposing its back to the strange birds. Under the moonlight, the stone giant's back revealed small spot. Boom! The stone giant's pillar of fire shot out and hit a strange bird. At the same time that strange bird turned into a fireball, another loud sound rang out. A curtain of fire that was nearly 100 times larger than the fireball appeared out of thin air. Although it didn't engulf all the strange birds, it still blocked the two stone giants behind the curtain of fire. On the other side of the curtain of fire, Xiao Hua stood in midair as if he was thinking about something. Gaga! The strange birds seemed unwilling to give up. They all pounced on the curtain of fire. Whether it was their wings or their beaks, they spat out a lot of pitch-black liquid. Some of the larger strange birds even fanned out some wind blades. Unfortunately, how could these strange birds' attacks break through the curtain of fire that Xiao Hua casually set up? After a moment, these strange birds saw that their attacks had no effect, so they tactfully flew away. Xiao Hua withdrew the curtain of fire and still stood in midair with a smile on his face. His gaze was also gentle as he watched the stone giant use its body to block the small stone giant. It seemed that this side of family made the evil aura that had infected him from the Daoist Devil War disappear a lot. Seeing that the strange birds didn't attack, the stone giant also turned its head and looked at the night sky with some astonishment. The small stone giant even peeked out its single eye from the side of the stone giant's body to peek. Seeing that not a single strange bird was left in the night sky, the small stone giant couldn't help but whisper, then. The stone giant raised its body and proudly patted its chest a few times, as if it was showing off. Then, the stone giant grabbed the small stone giant's body and jumped out of the stone wall, then fled forward. However, after fleeing for another 100 zhong, the stone giant seemed to think of something. It patted its head and turned its head to look for Xiao Hua. This old man is here. Xiao Hua hurriedly flew over and raised his hand to greet the stone giant. Then. The stone giant patted its chest and pointed at Xiao Hua again. Then, it pointed into the distance and beckoned Xiao Hua to quickly follow it. Xiao Hua faintly smiled, nodded slightly, and followed behind the stone giant. However, after walking for a few li, the stone giant became careful again and lightened its footsteps. Xiao Hua frowned and released his divine sense. However, he could only see for a few li gg. A soft roar like that of a mouse came from not far away. Although the sound was soft, it immediately made the stone giant tremble. Previously, it didn't fear the strange birds at all, but now, it was actually standing there and looking pitifully into the distance. In the dark night, a ball of golden brilliance that was only a few feet in size quickly rushed over. Inside the brilliance was a small child wearing armor and holding a weapon that looked like a spear in his hand. Damn it! A group of demons dancing wildly. Xiao Hua glanced around and withdrew his divine sense. He smiled and said, "During the day, I used my divine sense to see tens of thousands of li and didn't see anything. However, at night, everything comes out. Then. The small stone giant also saw the small golden armored person and couldn't help but cry out. Suddenly, it looked at Xiao Hua and pointed at him with all its strength, as if it was worried about Xiao Hua. Just as Xiao Hua was about to speak, a ray of light suddenly appeared in the distant horizon. This ray of light was 7-colored and formed a jade necklace in the night sky. Under this 7-colored light, even the moonlight high up in the sky lost its splendor. What was special was that after the ray of light, several roars came from all over the continent. Waves of desolate power surged out in all directions like a surging tide. Within this power, there was a vague shadow that crossed the restless night and flew towards the ray of light. This desolate power was so ferocious that although it rushed to where Xiao Hua was, whether it was the small golden armored person or the stone giant, They both prostrated themselves on the ground and trembled in fear. Oh! A desolate powerhouse? Facing this nameless power, Xiao Hua was also shocked. While urging his secret technique to resist, he narrowed his eyes and looked at the ray of light. He didn't dare to rashly release his divine sense and thought to himself, "What is this ray of light?" However, in just a few breaths, the ray of light immediately fell and disappeared without a trace. Only the nameless power annihilated Xiao Hua's surroundings. Xiao Hua's figure flickered and instantly disappeared. However, after a while, Xiao Hua reappeared not far away. He looked at the two stone giants lying on the ground and then looked at the small golden-armored person not far away. After thinking for a while, he called out Dragon Vein Xiao Hua and Phoenix Body Xiao Hua and said with a smile, "I still have some things to do. I'll have to trouble you two, fellow Taoist." -13. Chapter 4185. Fellow Taoist, you're really interesting. The Dragon Vein Xiao Hua said with a smile, "That place is obviously a secret treasure, and it might even contain the secrets of this continent. Fellow Taoist, you didn't personally explore it, but instead stayed here to protect two stone giants that you don't know. Fellow Taoist's actions really make I puzzled." Phoenix Body Xiao Hua was also puzzled. Fellow Taoist, even if you want to protect two stones that aren't human, you only need to throw the golden-armored little person far away. Why do you have to stay here? Xiao Hua's originally curved phoenix eyes were now curved like crescent moons. He said with a smile, "Although you two have already become independent adults, you still don't have the emotions of a true cultivator. The affection of these stone giants is really touching. If I don't send these two stone giants back to their home, I won't be able to rest assured. Moreover, to tell you the truth, I have a feeling that the karma of these two stone giants is more important than the secret treasure in the distance." Dragon Vein Xiao Hua and Phoenix Body Xiao Hua naturally didn't have Xiao Hua's karma. They both smiled at each other and flew towards the place where the multicolored light disappeared. Xiao Hua was still standing in the air, quietly waiting. After the time it took to eat a meal, the aura that suppressed everything gradually disappeared. The golden-armored little person was the first to get up from the ground. However, when the little person looked at the two stone giants on the ground, he didn't have any thoughts of attacking. He shrunk his neck and looked around, then turned around and ran away. Then, the golden-armored little person left. Only then did the stone giant straighten up. He awkwardly got up and ran in another direction. Only after running for a while did he remember Xiao Hua. He turned his head again and waved at Xiao Hua. Perhaps because of the change just now, they didn't encounter any special beasts in the next few mountain ridges. Looking at the vermilion mountain ridges in front of him and the hot air in front of him, Xiao Hua understood that this was probably the stone giant's home. Previously, when Xiao Hua looked down from high up in the sky, he didn't feel that it was too far away. However, when he really ran all the way with the stone giant, he realized the true distance. Then, Xiao Hua turned his head to look. Sure enough, the mountain peak that he had fallen from earlier just happened to be exposed in the distant mountain ridge. He reckoned that the little stone giant had seen something strange nearby and ran so far away alone to look for something. Then, the stone giant led Xiao Hua into the mountain ridge and circled around to the side of a huge boulder. He pointed at the boulder and pointed at it a few times before turning around and leaving. When Xiao Hua heard the stone giant say so many then, he finally understood the meaning of these two words. He smiled and calmly stood there. Xiao Hua released his divine sense and watched as the stone giant tiptoed around a few times, crossing over a dozen large stones. It even turned around to check if Xiao Hua was following. Xiao Hua couldn't help but laugh in his heart. Because right in front of the stone giant's head, there was a large amount of magma exposed on the ground. If Xiao Hua didn't know that the stone giant had magma inside its body, then it would be fine. But since he knew, how could he not know that the stone giant's cave was inside the magma? Sure enough, when the stone giant walked to the magma, the little stone giant jumped down from his body and happily jumped into the magma. The stone giant also walked to the magma and slowly submerged his body in the magma. When the stone giant's figure disappeared, Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over the magma and then withdrew it. Xiao Hua had also seen the magma before, but he didn't look into its depths. Naturally, he didn't know that there was a world inside the magma. After the time it took to eat a meal, the stone giant came out of the magma. Large drops of magma flowed on the surface of his body. The marks left by the strange bird's attack had already gradually disappeared. The stone giant walked out and arrived in front of Xiao Hua. He stretched out his hand, and in his hand were several mid-grade fire attribute primordial stones. Then, the stone giant placed the fire attribute primordial stones in front of Xiao Hua and shouted. His body was still emitting flames. Looking at the fire attribute primordial stones, Xiao Hua suddenly realized that the stone giant had brought him here to repay his kindness of saving the little stone giant. He was giving him the primordial stones. Xiao Hua smiled and slightly waved his hand. He pushed the fire attribute primordial stones to the stone giant, indicating that he didn't want them. Then, the stone giant was somewhat puzzled. He scratched his head and pushed the primordial stones in front of Xiao Hua again. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and took out a few top-grade primordial stones from his bosom. He spread them on his palm and showed them to the stone giant. Then, the stone giant saw the top-grade primordial stones in Xiao Hua's hand and immediately exclaimed. He stretched out his hand to grab the primordial stones, but his hand stopped in front of the primordial stones. Even the magma on his arm dripped onto Xiao Hua's hand. The stone giant obviously didn't notice that the magma on Xiao Hua's hand didn't cause any movement. He hurriedly waved his hand and pointed at the boulder where Xiao Hua was. Then, he said a few more times and hurriedly turned around. Xiao Hua was somewhat puzzled. He looked at the fire attribute primordial stones in his hand and rubbed his chin as he looked at the magma flowing from the stone giant's body. He seemed to be lost in thought. Not long after, another stone giant that was 3 times bigger than the previous one quickly ran over. The previous stone giant followed behind this stone giant. When this stone giant saw Xiao Hua, he immediately shouted, "So dense, so dense." He also put his palms together and saluted. Hihi, it seems that he said one more word than the previous stone giant. Xiao Hua laughed in his heart. He also put his palms together and saluted back. He didn't say anything. After a very strange salute, the stone giant stretched out a finger that was comparable to a tree and pointed at Xiao Hua's hand. He asked, "So dense, so dense." Xiao Hua was already calm and unafraid of the other side's all-encompassing "so dense," let alone the "so dense" that was one more word than "so dense." Xiao Hua understood and waved his hand. Several top-grade primordial stones fell into the stone giant's hand. The stone giant took the top-grade primordial stones and placed them in his hand. A faint flame was emitted from his single eye. The flame illuminated the night sky and caused the top-grade primordial stones to flash with flames. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the stone giant finished looking at the top-grade primordial stones one by one. He then carefully returned the primordial stones to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's impression of these stone giants immediately increased. He waved his hand, indicating that he didn't want the primordial stones and gave them to the stone giant. Unexpectedly, the stone giant shook his head and put the top-grade primordial stones in front of Xiao Hua. He put his palms together again and respectfully prostrated himself on the ground. He then put his palm in front of Xiao Hua and said, "So dense, so dense." Behind the stone giant, the previous stone giant also prostrated himself on the ground. It didn't seem like he was prostrating, but rather a welcoming ceremony. Xiao Hua naturally wasn't afraid that there was something fishy. He almost didn't think about it and floated onto the stone giant's palm. "So dense, so dense." The stone giant was very happy. He carefully lifted Xiao Hua in front of his chest and brought the previous stone giant back to the magma. When the stone giant walked in front of the magma, a scarlet halo appeared around his body. This halo came out from his palm and protected Xiao Hua. The magma emitted gurgling bubbles, just like what Xiao Hua saw in the flame forest swamp of the Xiaoyu continent. The stone giant's feet and body were steady, as if there were stairs in the magma. After walking for a while, The two stone giants turned around and continued to walk up. When the two finally walked out of the magma, Xiao Hua was actually in a space that was several hundred li in size. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept out and immediately saw clearly that most of the space was filled with magma. Aside from some small island-like protruding rocks within the magma, there were only some vermilion red rocks at the edges of the magma. These rocks were similarly burning with thin flames, roasting the space to an extreme degree. The stone giant respectfully placed Xiao Hua on the burning rocks, as if the flames on the rocks were ordinary grass. He didn't even think about whether Xiao Hua could withstand it. Xiao Hua naturally wasn't afraid of these flames and high temperature. He stepped on the magma. So secret, so secret. As the stone giant spoke, he respectfully clasped his hands together and bowed. Then, he turned around and walked into the ocean-like magma. In just a moment, his figure disappeared. Xiao Hua wanted to use his divine sense to chase after him, but he was a gentleman. Now that he was invited here, he naturally wouldn't look into other people's secrets. Therefore, he opened his mouth and wanted to say something to the stone giant. However, after opening his mouth, he swallowed his words back down. Xiao Hua really couldn't stand the stone giant's omnipotent so. At this moment, a hoarse and weak voice came from the magma lake in the distance. A stone giant floated over from the magma. When it rushed to the top of the rock, it looked like a dying person lying there. The stone giant beside Xiao Hua looked at the stone giant in the distance and then looked at Xiao Hua. He took out the primeval stones he wanted to give Xiao Hua and pointed at the stone giant in the distance. He asked, So, Xiao Hua was quite puzzled. He was confused, but he still nodded. The stone giant was very happy and rushed towards the stone giant's location. Xiao Hua's heart was moved, and his figure fluttered as he followed the stone giant. The stone giant came to the side of the stone giant and put several primeval stones into the stone giant's mouth. Crunch, crunch. The stone giant greedily chewed the primeval stones, just like a mortal who saw food. After a while, a scarlet halo appeared around the stone giant's body. Then, the stone giant was brimming with energy. He raised his hand and hammered the shoulder of the stone giant beside Xiao Hua a few times. He seemed to be calling out gratefully, then, so. The stone giant smiled and replied. It also hammered the shoulder of the stone giant. Looking at the stone giant that ate the primeval stones and then entered the magma lake, Xiao Hua somewhat understood. The fire primeval stones should be the stone giant's food. The stone giant just now was probably hungry. -13. Chapter 4186. Then. The stone giant raised his hands as if he wanted to explain something to Xiao Hua. The tone of his mouth was very apologetic. He should be apologizing for giving the primordial stones that were originally meant for Xiao Hua to another stone giant. Hee. Xiao Hua laughed. He didn't dare to ask whether the stone giant understood him or not. He laughed and said, saving your son was as easy as lifting a finger. In addition, it was me who scared him into falling. It doesn't matter if you give me the primordial stones or not. Then. Of course, the stone giant didn't understand what Xiao Hua was saying. However, he still laughed happily. His big mouth split open to both sides of his head. The stone giant accompanied Xiao Hua at the side of the magma. After half a meal's time, he didn't see the stone giant come back. Xiao Hua took a breath of extremely pure fire attributed primordial energy of heaven and earth. He felt very comfortable. No matter where in this world, it was the dream of cultivators to cultivate. It was no wonder that there were so many almighty people in the ancient times. Then, another voice sounded. The little stone giant that Xiao Hua saved also walked out of the magma. Looking at Xiao Hua beside the stone giant, he timidly walked over and whispered. The stone giant slightly shook his head. He said with difficulty, then he pointed at the magma, hinting the little stone giant to go back. The little stone giant pitifully walked 2 steps. He turned his head again and looked at the stone giant, unwilling to move. Then, the stone giant seemed to be angry. He raised his hand and clenched 3 fingers together to threaten the little stone giant. The little stone giant was helpless. He could only walk back to the magma. However, after he entered the magma, he turned his head and looked at Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's heart moved. He quickly raised his hand and took out a low-grade primordial stone. He said with a smile, "Little guy, do you want this thing?" Then, the little stone giant immediately cheered. He jumped out of the magma and quickly rushed in front of Xiao Hua. He snatched the low-grade primordial stone and stuffed it into his mouth. The stone giant beside Xiao Hua seemed to be a little embarrassed. He lowered his head and didn't express his intention. Xiao Hua was a little confused. This place had such pure primordial energy of heaven and earth and so much magma. How could there be no fire-attributed primordial stones? However, when he released his divine sense slightly, he came to a realization. This was because there were many rock giants swimming and lying in the lava within a few miles of the area. Although Xiao Hua didn't look into the distance, he absolutely believed that within these several hundred miles of magma, there were definitely even more stone giants. If they ate fire attribute source stones as food, then no matter how many source stones were condensed within the magma, it wouldn't be enough for them to eat. Moreover, looking at the little stone giant that had recovered its vigor and vitality, Xiao Hua understood even more clearly that this little fellow had probably seen him coming from beyond the heavens and thought that there would be some kind of opportunity. That was why it had run so far and passed by so many territories occupied by its natural enemies to look for delicious food. As for the stone giant, in order to thank Xiao Hua, it also gave him the few source stones it had. In Xiao Hua's eyes, source stones were source stones, but in the stone giant's eyes, they were the most precious thing. It was his life. Xiao Hua was a compassionate person. The actions of the 2 stone giants had moved him even more. He had the heart to help these stone giants. However, the stone giants weren't humans. Although there were source stones in Xiao Hua's space, these source stones weren't of good quality. No matter how much Xiao Hua gave them, they would eventually be used up. What Xiao Hua wanted to do was to find a way to solve this problem once and for all. Just as Xiao Hua was pondering, a burst of sound came from the magma. This sound fell into Xiao Hua's ears like thunder, causing him to be dumbfounded. Xiao Hua looked at the magma lake in disbelief. He saw the magma lake, which was thousands of feet deep, began to violently stir. Bubbles of several zhong in size emerged from the magma lake. Along with these bubbles, there was the sound of a wooden fish being struck. In front of Xiao Hua's dumbfounded eyes, a 1,000-foot-tall stone giant walked out of the lava lake. This stone giant's face was full of wrinkles, just like layers upon layers of rock. Behind this stone giant were several smaller stone giants, each of them holding a stone wooden fish. These stone wooden fish were probably the largest wooden fish Xiao Hua had ever seen. Each of these stone wooden fish was dozens of feet long, and each of the stone giants held stone rods that were dozens of feet long. As they struck these stone wooden fish, a crisp sound rang out. The last stone giant to appear from the magma lake was the stone giant who had previously entered the magma lake to report. At this time, the stone giant stepped on the waves and respectfully clasped his hands together and said, "So dense, so dense." Xiao Hua knew that the origin of this seemingly old stone giant was extraordinary. He also urged his body to step on the magma lake and meet the stone giant. Seeing that there was nothing wrong with Xiao Hua's body stepping on the magma lake, the old stone giant's eyes were filled with astonishment. Only when Xiao Hua flew closer did the stone giant wake up. He clasped his hands together and said, "Namo Metria Buddha." Xiao Hua was already surprised when the old stone giant called out the name of Buddha, but this name of Buddha was actually Namo Metria Buddha, which shocked Xiao Hua even more. Xiao Hua was stunned for a moment, then he came back to his senses. He bowed and said, "Namo Metria Buddha, Namo Metria Buddha, Namo Metria Buddha." When the old stone giant heard Xiao Hua's words, he was also happy. However, his eyes flashed with doubt as he asked, "Ah?" Xiao Hua saw the confusion in the old stone giant's eyes, and he himself was even more puzzled. However, in just a few breaths of time, Xiao Hua's head turned rapidly, and his face showed a strange expression. It seemed like he was smiling but not smiling, or he couldn't help laughing. After hearing the old stone giant's name of Namo Mettria Buddha, Xiao Hua finally understood that the big stone giant and the small stone giant spoke of was not so, but Namo, and the so dense that the stone giant spoke of was not so dense, but Namo Mettria. Perhaps these three stone giants didn't know how to speak, and only learned these three words. Although Xiao Hua understood the secret, in the face of the all-encompassing Namo Mettria Buddha, Xiao Hua still didn't know how to answer. However, he only hesitated for a few breaths of time, then he raised his hand and waved. The sound of falling rain could be seen in the air. Tens of thousands of fire element primordial stones appeared out of thin air and fell into the magma lake. Under the old stone giant's dumbstruck expression, a layer of primordial stones covered the magma lake, shining with a gorgeous luster. In an instant, the sound of the wooden fish suddenly stopped. The dozen stone giants holding the wooden fish couldn't help but say in unison, Namo Mettria Buddha, Namo Mettria Buddha, phew. The old stone giant breathed a long sigh of relief. He withdrew his shocked gaze and put his palms together, Namo Mettria Buddha, Namo Mettria Buddha. Xiao Hua smiled and said, I don't know why you're chanting Namo Mettria Buddha, but since you're a disciple of Buddhism, I can't treat you poorly. These origin stones can be considered as a gift from me. Please accept them. As he spoke, he used his hand to draw in the air and sent it to the old stone giant, indicating that all the primordial stones were given to him. Namo Mettria Buddha. The old stone giant naturally understood. His wrinkled face was filled with joy. He waved his hand and said again. Many stone giants walked forward and waved their hands, controlling the magma lake to collect the primordial stones. Then, the old stone giant respectfully pointed at the magma lake under his feet and said, Namo Mettria Buddha? Good. Xiao Hua knew that the old stone giant was inviting him to go deeper into the magma lake. He nodded and smiled in agreement. However, when the old stone giant was about to kneel on the magma lake and put his palms together, Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand and helped the old stone giant up. He pointed at his nose and then at the magma lake, indicating that he could go down. However, Xiao Hua's gesture was obviously not understood by the old stone giant. Therefore, Xiao Hua simply used an escape technique and entered the magma lake. Seeing that Xiao Hua could freely enter and exit the magma lake, the old stone giant's eyes almost fell out. The respect in his eyes was now mixed with a trace of fear. Please. Xiao Hua raised his hand and gestured. The old stone giant hurriedly nodded and called out Namo Mettria Buddha as his figure disappeared into the magma lake. Xiao Hua followed the old stone giant into the magma lake and went deeper into the magma lake. Just as Xiao Hua had seen with his divine sense, there were many stone giants in the magma lake. Some stone giants were leisurely walking in the magma lake. When they saw the old stone giant, they respectfully saluted him. Some stone giants had their eyes tightly closed, as if they were sleeping in the magma lake. Even more stone giants were moving up and down the magma lake, looking very busy as if they were looking for something. After traveling for half the time it took to eat a meal, the entire bottom of the magma lake began to slowly shrink. In the end, it shrank into an oval-shaped hole that was more than 10 li in size. Below the hole, there was more magma flowing, and it was even more scorching. Obviously, this was the core of the magma lake. Near the oval-shaped hole, there were many stone giants, but now there were few people. It seemed that even the stone giants didn't dare to get too close to the core of the magma lake. The surroundings of the cave were similarly filled with large and small ochre-red boulders. These boulders were of different shapes and looked very strange. However, the strangest thing was not these boulders, but the Buddhist shrine at the highest point of the boulder. This Buddhist shrine was neither big nor small, but when the old stone giant walked to the front of the Buddhist shrine, Xiao Hua understood that this Buddhist shrine was not even as tall as the old stone giant's knees. When the old stone giant landed in front of the Buddhist shrine, he respectfully prostrated himself on the ground, saluting according to Buddhist etiquette. His figure in front of the Buddhist shrine was especially huge, and his piety made Xiao Hua sigh. However, when Xiao Hua's gaze passed the old stone giant's figure and landed on the Buddhist statue in the Buddhist shrine, he was stunned again. How could it be him? Xiao Hua's heart almost jumped out of his chest. He looked at the Buddhist shrine in disbelief and couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice, "Namo Mettria Buddha, is actually Liu Er?" -13. Chapter 4187. That's right, in that crude, stone-built Buddhist shrine, there was a fiery red Buddha statue carved out of crystal, flashing with holy Buddha light. The Buddha light shone brightly on the face of the Buddha statue. Wasn't that the lifelike Jiang Liuer? Xiao Hua had once stopped Jiang Liuer, whose Buddhist name was Chuanzang, from taking down the Buddhist edict in the Jiangchao temple. He had a deep impression of Jiang Liuer's shaved head. Now that he saw the Buddha statue, he naturally thought of Jiang Liuer. How is this possible? After Xiao Hua recovered from his shock, he muttered, "What's going on? How can Jiang Liuer be Nanwu Mettria Buddha? How can his Buddha statue be in this mysterious primitive continent?" Xiao Hua's suspicions were heavy, but looking at the old stone giant who had already stood up, Xiao Hua knew that he wouldn't be able to get anything out of this old stone giant. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and waved his hand, releasing Buddha body from his Niwen palace. Buddha body looked around in bewilderment, activating the Buddha light to block the magma outside his body. He cupped his hands and asked, "Nanwu Mettria Buddha, why did Tan Yu ask this poor monk to come out?" Xiao Hua didn't explain much. He pointed at the shrine behind Buddha body and said weakly, "What's the matter? See for yourself. Why ask so much?" "Oh." Buddha body was even more puzzled, but when he saw the Buddha statue in the shrine, Buddha body smiled bitterly and replied, "Tan Yu, what else do you want this poor monk to say? Jiang Liuer is the real reincarnation of Nanwu Mettria Buddha, this poor monk is the fake. Or it could be said that this poor monk stole Jiang Liuer's luck and practiced the exquisite Lotus Leaf Sutra first." Hiss. Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. The thoughts in his mind instantly became clear. That's right. This Xiao lost his memory and wandered to the Dawn Rain continent. By a freak combination of factors, this Xiao obtained the exquisite Lotus Leaf Pagoda. In fact, this Xiao is the intruder of the Dawn Rain continent. If this Xiao didn't lose his memory, this exquisite Lotus Leaf Pagoda would have fallen into his hands after Jiang Liuer was born. Then he, a cultivator who couldn't practice Daoist techniques, would start practicing the real Buddhist techniques. After all, he is the real reincarnation of Mettria Buddha. Furthermore, if Tan Yu hadn't come to the Dawn Rain continent, Jiang Liuer would still be on the Dawn Rain continent. Although he wouldn't be able to obtain the gold leaf from the Great Snow Mountain, he would still be able to cultivate the exquisite Leaf Sutra, and not the current Prajna Heart Sutra. Buddha Subhuti reminded, "You wouldn't have come to this fork in the road, and there wouldn't have been any sutra-seeking bliss." However, Xiao Hua was even more puzzled. He asked, if Jiang Liuer is Namo Mettria Buddha, then whose Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra is? Back on the Great Snow Mountain, didn't that old monk also say? Sigh. At this point, Xiao Hua once again sucked in a breath of cold air, because everything that the old monk had said to him that day was equally suitable for Jiang Liuer. Jiang Liuer also understood the language of the Dawn Rain continent. Could it be that the old monk of the Great Snow Mountain is waiting for Jiang Liuer? It's not me. Xiao Hua has a strange feeling, but if the old monk wasn't waiting for this Xiao, then the old monk shouldn't have died that day. He should still have a longer lifespan. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua seems to have thought of something. He hurriedly waved his hand and took out the pills he had obtained from the kitchen of the Great Snow Mountain. A silver-white halo flashed across his eyes. After looking at it for a moment, he said somewhat dejectedly, "Not bad. This is a spirit medicine that can extend one's lifespan." One pill can extend one's lifespan by 10 years, or even more. That old monk still had a lot of it in his kitchen. He should still be alive. He mistook me for this Xiao and stopped taking it. It can be said that he was burned alive. Namo Mettria Buddha. Buddha Subhuti sighed and said again, if this Buddha fruit belonged to someone else, it would still be snatched. But this Buddha fruit belongs to Liuer. How can we snatch it? Yes, that's right. Xiao Hua nodded. Liu's sutra seeking bliss is most likely an arrangement of the Buddhist sect to let him attain the Buddha fruit of Namo Maitreya Buddha. When we return to the hidden immortal continent, we will settle this matter. There's another question. Buddha Subhuti said again, if we snatch Liu's Buddha fruit and fate, then whose did Liu snatch? That Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra, from the records of the Buddhist sect, it should be a cultivation technique cultivated by Ananda. Where is Ananda now? What is the Buddha fruit that Jiang Liu attained? It's a mess, a mess. Xiao Hua rubbed his temples in distress and said with a bitter smile, didn't your Buddhist sect cultivate the golden body of 9 lives and control reincarnation? How did such a big accident happen today? Haven't you heard of that saying? Things that can go wrong will definitely go wrong. Or is it that things that you worry about going wrong will definitely go wrong? Buddha Subhuti answered with a smile, although my Buddhist sect's Arhat cultivates the golden body of reincarnation, it's inevitable that there will be accidents in the process. This accident is another person's opportunity and also his own tribulation. Today's situation is Jiang Liu's tribulation and this poor monk's opportunity. That's true. Xiao Hua nodded, if nothing goes wrong, all the Buddha fruits have already been attained by the Buddha Lord and the Bodhisattvas. How can they be left for the younger generation? At this point, Xiao Hua seemed to think of something and said to Buddha Subhuti apologetically, fellow immortal, although this is our opportunity, but it's also Liu's tribulation. We are Liu's elders and senior sister is also very good to me. Haha. Buddha Subhuti waved his hand and said, Namo Maitreya, you're thinking too much. Although this poor monk is an outsider, this poor monk and Sandalwood are one. Didn't Sandalwood say earlier? We are born from the same root and definitely can't cause trouble. This poor monk deeply agrees. Liu is Sandalwood's nephew and also this poor monk's nephew. It doesn't matter if this poor monk doesn't attain the Buddha fruit or not. The key is the kinship that Sandalwood mentioned. Although this poor monk doesn't understand this kinship too well, this poor monk knows that this is the most important thing in this world to Sandalwood. This poor monk can give up the Buddha fruit for this so-called kinship. At this point, Buddha Subhuti changed the topic and said with a smile, moreover, Sandalwood, don't forget that this poor monk still has the Buddha fruit of Namo Great Compassion Great Guanyin Bodhisattva to attain. Good. Xiao Hua listened and said with a smile, if fellow immortal has such a mind, there's hope for attaining the Buddha fruit in this life. Namo Maitreya. Buddha Subhuti put his palms together and chanted Buddha's name without saying anything else. When Xiao Hua and Buddha Subhuti were talking, the old stone giant didn't pay attention. First, Xiao Hua and Buddha Subhuti rarely spoke. Most of the time, it was a mental communication. Other people simply couldn't hear anything. Second, even if the old stone giant could hear, he simply couldn't understand what Xiao Hua was saying. After the old stone giant respectfully saluted, he got up and wanted to say something to Xiao Hua. However, when his single eye looked past Xiao Hua and landed on Buddha Subhuti's body, extreme shock appeared in his single eye. He opened his mouth and said, Namo Maitreya, Namo Maitreya. One after another, he was stunned for half a cup of tea's time. Plop. The old stone giant suddenly knelt in front of Buddha Subhuti. Magma flowed out of his single eye and his mouth was sobbing. However, he still chanted the same 6-word. Buddha body sighed and lifted the old stone giant up. With a benevolent look in his eyes, he said, Namo Maitreya Buddha, I'm not the Maitreya Buddha that you guys worship. I'm just an ordinary bodhisattva. Namo Maitreya. The old stone giant didn't care about what Buddha Subhuti said. He just used his big hand to carefully pull Buddha Subhuti's monk robe and chanted Buddha's name again and again. Although his pronunciation wasn't accurate, his incomparable devotion actually made Buddha Subhuti feel a trace of the power of faith. How is this possible? Buddha Subhuti was somewhat astonished. He looked at Xiao Hua in puzzlement. After all, he wasn't Jiang Liu, nor was he Maitreya. How could he obtain the old stone giant's faith? However, although the power of faith was particularly weak, it was real. Buddha Subhuti rarely obtained any faith in the past tens of thousands of years. Therefore, he could clearly perceive the appearance of the power of faith. Xiao Hua looked at the old stone giant's appearance and then looked at Buddha Subhuti's puzzlement. He also frowned. Normally, he would definitely encourage Buddha Subhuti to help. However, if Buddha Subhuti were to help now, it would clearly be snatching the opportunity from Jiang Liu. Not only was Buddha Subhuti hesitating, he was also hesitating. Fellow immortal. Xiao Hua's heart moved, and he said, previously, the human race on Shenhua continent was not prosperous. Fellow Daoist in green robes controlled the entire fortune gate by himself. Even fellow Daoist in Confucianism couldn't spread his branches and leaves. Now, the human race on this continent is flourishing. I'm afraid that there are more than 100 million of them. These humans also have the power of faith. Fellow immortal, you can spread the essence of Buddhism on Shenhua continent. Haha, Tan Yu, I'm afraid that even a wise man will make a mistake. Buddha Subhuti laughed. The human race on Shenhua continent is flourishing. They can cultivate Taoism, Confucianism, and even soul cultivators can preach. This poor monk won't compete with them. This poor monk has a better place. Oh, what else is there? Xiao Hua was slightly taken aback. However, it was only a moment before Xiao Hua came to a sudden realization. Soon after, he bowed respectfully and said, Namo Mettria Buddha, since fellow immortal has such a great wish, this poor Daoist will address you as master in the future. I don't dare. Buddha Subhuti said compassionately, humans are fruits, devils are fruits, beasts are fruits, and demons are also fruit. Everything in this world is a fruit in the eyes of my Buddhism sect. Tan Yu has taken in so many devils, but you still haven't found a way to deal with them. Leave these devils to this poor monk. This poor monk doesn't have to compete with you fellow immortals for anything. Master is merciful. Hearing Buddha Subhuti's great wish, Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. He called him master and said, I didn't think things through that day and brought great trouble to master. Namo Mettria Buddha, this is tribulation, fate, cause, and effect. Buddha Subhuti nodded slightly. He then looked at the old stone giant who was carefully looking at him. The lava in the stone giant's eye had already flowed to his chest. -13. Chapter 4188. Buddha body pondered for a moment and continued, although this poor monk is not Jiang Liu, this poor monk is Namo Mettria in front of the old stone giant. In his eyes, there is no difference between a bodhisattva and a Buddha lord. Just like Tan Yu in the hidden immortal continent, although Tan Yu used the name of compassionate travel and the image of compassionate bodhisattva, the strength of faith is gathered on Namo Mettria merciful bodhisattva. Even if this poor monk does good deeds now, the strength of faith will fall on Namo Mettria Buddha. When you and I return to the hidden immortal continent, this poor monk will give up this good karma and give it to Jiang Liu. Won't this karma end? It seems to be different. Xiao Hua shook his head slightly, disagreeing. As for why, he himself was not clear. Buddha body looked at the old stone giant and then raised his head to look at the magma. As if he was aware of the movement here, he slowly turned to the stone giants gathered here and said only one sentence. If the Buddha fruit is this poor monk's, other bodhisattvas will want to help these devout believers, even if they get this merit. Then this poor monk will absolutely not resent them, and also absolutely do not want this merit. This poor monk would rather these devout believers keep their faith in my Buddhist kingdom. If you think it's right, then do it. Xiao Hua already understood what Buddha body wanted to do. He nodded, that Jiang Liu who took down the Buddha list and embarked on the path of sutra seeking in nirvana is definitely not that kind of petty bodhisattva. Namo Mettria Buddha. Body Buddha chanted the name of Buddha and pointed at the old stone giant's forehead with his slender finger, saying, with my life, I call upon the supreme mercy of Buddha, dispel the ignorance of the world, wash away the stubbornness of the mortal world, gain the wisdom of 100 monks, and open the true words of the light of Buddha. Namo Mettria Buddha, Namo Mettria Buddha. As Buddha body's finger fell, numerous phantoms appeared in the magma nearby. Tens of thousands of Buddhas appeared in the phantoms, and chants of Buddha came from the small worlds. When Buddha body's finger touched the stone giant's forehead, a cluster of spirit light appeared from the stone giant's forehead. It was so simple yet so bright. Even someone as strong as Xiao Hua felt his vision blur. Countless images appeared and instantly disappeared in the spirit light. Tens of thousands of scriptures appeared and instantly disappeared in the spirit light. Crack. At this moment, in the shrine not far away, the forehead of the Namo-Metriya Buddha carved with crimson crystal split open, and a scar visible to the naked eye divided Jiang Liu's face into two halves. Xiao Hua was shocked and unconsciously said, "Good, good." In a moment, the spirit light converged on the stone giant's forehead, and a trace of clarity flashed in the stone giant's eyes. Buddha body withdrew his flower-pinching finger, and the light of Buddha around him dimmed a little. His face was neither happy nor sad as he said, "Old man, do you understand?" Namo-Metriya Buddha. The old stone giant's face was filled with surprise, and he immediately responded. However, that was all, and he didn't say anything else. Xiao Hua was taken aback. He was quite puzzled in his heart because the Buddhist Dharma was boundless. Most of the time, the Buddhist Dharma that Buddha Subhuti knew was even more powerful than his own Tao Dharma. Since Buddha Subhuti was using this Buddhist Dharma at this moment, then he must be confident. Buddha body wasn't surprised. He just closed his eyes for a moment, and then he opened them and said with a smile, "Old man, you should be able to understand this poor monk's words, but you can't say it because you don't know how to say it, and you don't know how to write it." Namo-Metriya Buddha. The old stone giant nodded and put his palms together. "Good." Buddha body nodded slightly and said again, "Old man, if you think this Dharma is useful, you can bring your people here, and this Dharma is willing to use it on them one by one. What do you think?" "Master, are you crazy?" Without waiting for the old stone giant to speak, Xiao Hua anxiously pointed at the Buddha statue in the shrine and whispered, "This Dharma can only be used by a Buddha Lord who has Buddha fruit. It's fine if Master uses the power of faith of Buddha Metriya to use it once, but if you use it one by one, the consequences will be unimaginable." Namo-Metriya Buddha. "If I don't go to hell, who will?" Buddha body glanced at the Buddha statue and said, "This Dharma will only use this Dharma. This Dharma will bear all the consequences, and I'm willing to give all the merit to Namo-Metriya Buddha." Namo-Metriya Buddha. At this moment, the old stone giant replied and respectfully invited Buddha body to take a seat. He walked into the magma and patted the magma with his hand. He chanted Buddha's name again, and the stone giants walked out of the magma. Xiao Hua looked at the old stone giant gathering his people, and then at the Buddha statue in the shrine. At this moment, the cracks were getting deeper, and there was even some red liquid seeping out, just like the blood on the body. Xiao Hua's heart thumped, and he whispered, "Master, perhaps I was wrong. Master is borrowing the power of Namo-Metriya Buddha to use Dharma, maybe you're robbing Jiang Liu's opportunity." Buddha body's eyebrows twitched slightly, and he lowered his head and said, "Namo-Metriya Buddha, this Dharma has said that it's fate and tribulation. If this Dharma wants to help these stone giants survive, this Dharma can't be considered one by one. Actually, you don't have to do this." Xiao Hua smiled and said, "What the stone giants need are fire-type primordial stones. Although there are no ready-made ones in the magma, as long as they master the method to absorb fire-type primordial chi, wouldn't it have the same effect as taking fire-type primordial stones? I only need to use Dharma to let them know how to cultivate. I'm afraid things aren't as simple as you think." Buddha body glanced at the damaged Buddha statue in the shrine and said, "Since there's a Buddha statue of Namo-Metriya Buddha here, it's impossible for it to appear out of thin air. Presumably, Liu must have been here in his previous life. If Liu can come here, then his Dharma cultivation is definitely more profound than this Dharma. If even he can't enlighten these stone giants, how can this Dharma do it? How can Dharma do it?" Sigh. Xiao Hua had always relied on Taoism's divine abilities, and his thoughts were similar to those of Taoism's experts. He felt that everything could be solved by Taoism's divine abilities. Now that he heard Buddha body's words, it was as if he was enlightened. He sucked in a breath of cold air, and said with some sincerity, "I was wrong. Enlightening these stone giants can't rely on Dharma or Taoism for a moment, but the power of time and a tenacious heart. Only when one accumulates 1,000 miles can it be effective. Namo Metriya Buddha, that's exactly it. Buddha body nodded. Although we Buddhists don't teach secular people, and are somewhat different from Confucian cultivators, we have the same effect in praising the Dharma. As he said that, Buddha body glanced at the Buddha statue again and said, Liu might have known this in his previous life, but why didn't he do it? Was it because he didn't have enough time, or was it because he didn't have the right opportunity? This is hard to figure out. It's probably because there was an opportunity to leave this continent, and he didn't have time to do these things, so he left his Buddha statue behind to teach the stone giants. Xiao Hua smiled. Unfortunately, this enlightenment took a wrong path, and only let the stone giants understand the 6 words Namo Metriya Buddha. Let this little monk walk this unfinished path for him. Buddha body also smiled, and said, it's a pity that this little monk came in a hurry, and didn't transform into Liu's appearance. Form isn't emptiness isn't form is emptiness is form. Grandmaster, you're a little stubborn. Xiao Hua smiled. Although the old stone giant couldn't communicate with Xiao Hua and the others, now that he had obtained the root of wisdom, his mind was clear and bright. His command of the stone giant tribe was different from before. He spoke less of the name Namo Metriya Buddha and his movements were orderly. Not long after, the tribe members who were slightly closer to the shrine had already lined up and waited in the magma. Those stone giants who had previously taken the primordial stones also walked over and placed the primordial stones beside the old stone giant. The old stone giant looked at the stone giants, then raised his hand slightly and turned to Buddha body. Buddha body understood and stepped on a Buddhist lotus to the top of the shrine. The old stone giant put his palms together and said, Namo Metriya Buddha. The stone giants called out Namo Metriya, or Namo Metriya, and worshipped with incomparable devotion. When the stone giant straightened up, Buddha body held a flower with both hands, and it turned into 1,000 arms that fell on the stone giant's forehead. Seeing that the magma was filled with spiritual light and countless primal stones, the stone giant's eyes flashed with clarity. When Buddha body withdrew the Buddhist light, his body trembled slightly, and the stone giant said, Namo Metriya Buddha. Good. Buddha body's eyes narrowed, and his gaze was filled with compassion as he said. Then, Buddha body sat cross-legged on the lotus, closed his eyes, and chanted Buddhist scriptures. After the stone giants bowed and saluted the old stone giant, they took their own primordial stones and left through the magma. They didn't stop for long. Xiao Hua stood at the side and didn't look carefully. He only occasionally looked at the Buddha statue in the shrine. The cracks on the statue were getting bigger and deeper, and an unfathomable expression appeared on his face. After a few days, the stone giants were all enlightened by Buddha body. Xiao Hua looked around and found that there were actually close to 10,000 stone giants living in this several hundred li-wide magma. It was no wonder that the fire-type primal stones in the magma were all dug out, and not a single one could be found. After a few days, Buddha body began to teach the stone giants simple Buddhist scriptures. However, after a few tries, he gave up and followed Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's suggestion to start from the very beginning. After another half a day, seeing that Buddha body was too busy, Xiao Hua simply took out his remaining disciples from the space and had them teach the 10,000 stone giants how to recognize and pronounce word. Of course, the language that Xiao Hua and Buddha body chose was the human language of the ruins. -13. Chapter 4189. Looking at the huge stone giants sitting in the magma and learning from Fu Jiwen and the others, Xiao Hua suddenly had a familiar feeling. It was as if he had returned to the time when he was struggling to learn. However, at the same time, Xiao Hua was a little worried in his heart. The Buddha statue in the shrine had almost been broken into 2 halves. The crack from the top cut across the heart of the Buddha statue and went all the way to the lower body. Crimson liquid flowed like a candle's tears onto the 9 lotus platforms below the Buddha statue. If it weren't for the 9 lotus platforms protecting the Buddha statue, the entire Buddha statue would have been completely split apart. Dragon vein Xiao Hua and Phoenix body Xiao Hua did not return. Xiao Hua also did not receive any messages from them. However, Xiao Hua was not alarmed. Presumably, even if the two clones encountered any danger, their lives would not be in danger. On this day, the entire magma lake was producing rhythmic sounds of reading. Xiao Hua, who was sitting cross-legged, suddenly frowned and looked outside the magma lake with some surprise. Rumble. A slight tremor came from the ground. Even though the magma had already offset a lot of the tremor, it could still be heard under the magma. The old stone giant who was struggling to pronounce the words immediately stood up from the ground and called out very fluently, "Namo Metria Buddha, Namo Metria Buddha." In a moment, all the stone giants who were learning how to pronounce the words stood up and shouted loudly. A fighting spirit emerged from these stone giants. Enemy, enemy. The old stone giant only now remembered that Buddha body was beside him. He hastily pointed above and stammered, "Go!" Buddha body nodded and waved his hand to give an order. Then, the old stone giant called out Namo Metria Buddha and orderly arranged a group of stone giants to rush out of the underground space from various parts of the magma lake. "We will also go out and take a look. It seems like something interesting has happened." Xiao Hua smiled and said to Buddha body and Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua and the other clones, "This little monk has the same intention." Buddha body nodded and stood up on his Buddhist lotus. Xiao Hua, however, shook his head. "Fellow Taoists, let's go. I have been dizzy from these rocks for the past few days. I still want to take a look at the magma and refine my wood origin." "All right, go ahead, fellow Taoist. Just be careful." When Xiao Hua first saw the Buddhist shrine, he had already clearly seen the bottom of the magma. There was a completely different world under that oval-shaped hole. There were even a few places inside that Xiao Hua's divine sense couldn't penetrate. The stone giant couldn't enter, so he naturally didn't know. Xiao Hua had been concentrating on teaching the stone giant for the past few days, so he didn't have the mood to explore. Now that he heard that the bone-honing Xiao Hua wanted to go, he naturally reminded him. "Rest assured, fellow Taoist." Bone-honing Xiao Hua laughed. "I know what I'm doing." When the bone-honing Xiao Hua's figure fell into the hole, Xiao Hua led the group of disciples and his avatar out of the magma lake. When Xiao Hua escaped out of the ground, he was met with a dense aura of desolation. That viscous heaven and earth origin energy made him unable to help but take a deep breath. When his whole body felt comfortable, he couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Damn it, this group of stone men. There was clearly heaven and earth origin energy around them that could save their lives, yet they insisted on looking for origin stones. If they hadn't met me, I'm afraid they would have starved to death while hugging the gold mountain. Fellow Taoists' thinking is too simple. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua laughed. These stone men originally had stone brains. Other than knowing how to find origin stones, they don't know anything else. If ordinary people want to cultivate Taoist techniques, they also have to rely on luck. If their aptitude is slightly lacking, they won't be able to sense heaven and earth origin energy. You want these stone men who don't know how to speak and don't know how to cultivate to learn Taoist techniques? That's really difficult. Ari, indeed. Xiao Hua nodded. I don't remember much about my childhood, but I still have some impressions. I's path of seeking Tao when I was young was very tortuous. Even since I had memories of hidden immortal continent, I's path of cultivation wasn't smooth. In short, what Master wants to do is extremely difficult. Fu Jiwen, who was standing respectfully at the side, heard this and echoed. However, if it can really be done, the merit of teaching is really enough for Master to use. Jiwen is right. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua agreed. Which one of us Confucian cultivators didn't have the merit of teaching? Confucius, Mencius, each and every one of them has a merit as vast as the Milky Way. Ha ha. Hearing this, Xiao Hua suddenly laughed. He patted his head and said, I was fooled by the little monk. Damn it, Liu Er's cultivation in his previous life was indeed deeper than mine, but what he can't do, it doesn't mean that we can't do it. It's impossible to travel 1,000 miles without taking a few steps, but if we have a direction, we can naturally reach it with the help of flying equipment. Oh! Ha ha ha! Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. After a moment, he also came to his senses. He looked at Buddha body and said with a smile, yes, it's really like this. We have a heaven-defying space, why can't we use it? Xiao Hua and the others landed on a nearby mountain ridge. As they spoke, groups of stone giants also walked out from various places on the vermilion ground. At this time, between the mountains, a large number of stone giants appeared out of nowhere. These stone giants lined up, holding some strange stone tools in their hands. They neatly encircled the entire plain. It was this orderly pace that alarmed the old stone giant under the magma. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over these stone giants, and he couldn't help but frown. Except for the stone tools in their hands, these attacking stone giants didn't look any different from the stone giants in the magma. Namo Metria Buddha. Just as Xiao Hua was puzzled, the stone giants that came out of the magma had already formed a formation. Moreover, this formation didn't look much inferior to the stone giants that surrounded them. Following the old stone giant's roar, all the stone giants waved their fists and rushed towards the besieged stone giants. In just a moment, a tragic scene appeared in front of Xiao Hua and the others. Whether it was the attacking stone giants or the defending stone giants, they all began to be injured. Some had lost arms, some had broken legs, and some had even lost half of their heads. However, no matter how injured they were, the two sides of the stone giants didn't shrink back. They attacked with all their might, trying their best to kill the other side in their own hand. Xiao Hua and the other clones, as well as many disciples, stayed on top of the mountain peak to watch, but they didn't make a move. Of course, based on the current battle situation, not to mention Xiao Hua, even Fujiwen and the other disciples could definitely kill the invading stone giants. However, Fujiwen and the others couldn't make a move because they didn't understand why these stone giants were attacking the stone giants in the magma. Strange. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua looked at the two sides that were in a stalemate and asked in a low voice, all wars in the world have a cause. On the surface, the Great War of the Tao of the Ruins was for the billions of wandering souls, but in secret, it was for the origin of wood, and even for the formation of the demonic spirit. Why are these two stone giants here? For the fire attribute primordial stones? There are no primordial stones in the magma, so it's impossible for these stone giants to not know. What if it's to kill the other side? These two sides are both stone giants, so there's no reason for them to naturally counter each other. Martial uncles. Jiang Hong said in a low voice from the side, these invading stone giants, they're not shouting Namo Metria Buddha, but it seems to be dragon language. Ah! Dragon language? Xiao Hua was startled, and immediately listened carefully. Sure enough, the attacking stone giants seemed to be vaguely shouting, Long live the dragon god, long live the dragon god, which was exactly opposite to the Namo Metria Buddha that the magma stone giants were shouting. Damn it, there's something strange. Xiao Hua patted his forehead, somewhat vexed. Could it be that these stone giants aren't here for the primordial stones? Could it be that they're here for the so-called faith? Could it be that on this mysterious continent, other than Namo Metria Buddha, there's another dragon god? Master, take a closer look. Jiang Hong looked carefully at the side and said, those stone giants shouting dragon god seem to have some dragon markings on their bodies, but these dragon markings are extremely few, only half a trace or a trace. Correct. That's exactly the case. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and nodded. Previously, I couldn't see clearly, but now that they're shouting long live the dragon god and fighting with the magma stone giants, I can see clearly. Not only that, these magma stone giants also have an extremely faint swastika character on their bodies. Don't you think so, Master Subhuti? Namo Metria Buddha. How could Buddha Subhuti not see this? His eyes were filled with compassion, and he chanted the name of Buddha. Although the stone giants weren't humans, they were still alive, and in this kind of slaughter, it was inevitable that there would be casualties. Green-robed fellow Daoist. Xiao Hua instructed, use a thunderous method to make these stone giants stop fighting. I really don't understand why they're fighting. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua smiled and said, fellow Daoist, you're confused. Green-robed fellow Daoist and soul cultivator fellow Daoist are building a transfer array. They're not here. Then I'll have to trouble you, fellow Daoist Confucian cultivator. Xiao Hua was truly somewhat anxious, and said impatiently, make them quickly stop this senseless slaughter. This young one understands. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua naturally understood what Xiao Hua was thinking. He waved his hand, and tens of millions of 5-chi righteous thunders appeared out of thin air. With a rumbling sound, they struck down, scaring all the stone giants into a daze on the spot. Namo Metria Buddha! The magma stone giants took the lead to shout, and each of them covered their heads and fled towards the entrance of the magma. The attacking stone giants were no exception, and after only holding on for a few breaths, they also fled in panic. Jiang Hong. Seeing the stone giants run away, Xiao Hua instructed, transform into your figure, and follow these stone giants to see what's going on. Yes, disciple understands. Jiang Hong's body surged with dragon markings, and her figure immediately flew up. 13. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,